hemisphere ever, and the second hottest winter in the southern hemisphere ever. The years 2015 to 2019, the 5 hottest year on the books ever. Our warming Earth is issuing a chilling cry: stop. If we don't urgently change our ways of life, you jeopardize life itself. Look around. Seas are rising and oceans are acidifying. Glaciers are melting and corals are bleaching. Droughts are spreading and wildfires are burning. Deserts are expanding and access to water is dwindling. Heat waves are scorching and natural disasters are multiplying. Storms everywhere are more intense, more frequent, more deadly. I've seen it with my own eyes, from Dominica to the Sahel to the South Pacific. In May, I went to the island nation of Tuvalu, where I witnessed an entire country fighting for its very existence against the rising seas. 2 months ago, I visited Mozambique, which was pummeled by unprecedented back-to-back cyclones. A few days ago, I was in the Bahamas, where Hurricane Dorian pounded the country for 2 unrelenting days. The destruction was not simply appalling, it was apocalyptic. Make no mistake, when we see those images, we are not just seeing damage, we are seeing the future if we do not act now. Dear friends, someone asked me the other day, doesn't all of this make you despair? My answer was a clear and resounding no. I am hopeful. And I am hopeful because of you. This is not a climate talk summit. We have had enough talk. This is not a climate negotiating summit because we don't negotiate with nature. This is a climate action summit. From the beginning, I said the ticket to entry is not a beautiful speech, but concrete action. And you are here with commitments. Governments are here to show you are serious about enhancing nationally determined contributions under the Paris Agreement. Cities and businesses are here showing what leadership looks like, investing in a green future. Financial actors are here to scale up action and deploy resources in fundamentally new and meaningful ways. And coalitions are here with partnerships and initiatives to move us closer to a resilient, carbon-neutral world by 2050. I'm very grateful to the leaders and members of the 9 wide-ranging coalitions that worked with great creativity and passion so that we can all get the most out of this summit. And young people, above all, young people are here providing solutions, insisting on accountability and demanding urgent action. They are right. My generation has failed in its responsibility to protect our planet. That must change. The climate emergency is a race we are losing, but it is a race we can win. The climate crisis is caused by us, and the solutions must come from us. We have the tools. Technology is on our side. Readily available technological substitutions already exist for more than 70% of today's emissions. And we have the roadmap, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Paris Agreement on climate change. And we have the imperative, undeniable, irrefutable science. The best science, according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, tells us that any temperature rise about 1.5 degrees will lead to major and irreversible damage to the ecosystems that support us. But science also tells us it is not too late. We can do it. Limiting warming to 1.5 degrees is still possible. But it will require fundamental transformations in all aspects of society. How we grow food, use land, fuel our transport, and power our economies. We need to link climate change to a new model of development, a fair globalization, with less suffering, more justice and harmony between people and planet. Dear friends, there is a cost to everything, but the biggest cost is doing nothing. The biggest cost is subsidizing a dying fossil fuel industry, building more and more coal power plants, and denying what is plain as day, that we are in a deep climate hole, and to get out, we must first stop digging. After all, it is common sense to give is it common sense to give trillions in hard-earned taxpayers' money to the fossil fuel industry to boost hurricanes, spread tropical diseases, and heighten conflict? Is it common sense to build ever more coal plants that are choking our future? Is it common sense to reward pollution that kills millions with dirty air and makes it dangerous for people in cities around the world to sometimes even venture out of their homes? It is time to shift taxes from salaries to carbon and to tax pollution, not people. Chers amis, la communauté scientifique ne cesse de nous rappeler nous devons à tout prix réduire les émissions de gaz à effet de serre de 45% d'ici à 2030, atteindre la neutralité carbone d'ici 2050 et limiter la hausse de la température globale à 1,5 degrés Celsius d'ici à la fin du siècle. Une accélération forte des financements climatiques est donc nécessaire. Il est ainsi indispensable de reconstituer les ressources du Fonds vert pour le climat, tout comme il est essentiel que les pays développés respectent l'engagement pris de mobiliser d'ici 2020 100 milliards de dollars par an de fonds publics et privés afin de soutenir les pays en développement dans leurs efforts d'atténuation et d'adaptation. Car même si l'on réussit à baisser les émissions, les effets dramatiques du changement climatique sont déjà là et l'adaptation est donc devenue une priorité absolue et une condition essentielle pour augmenter la résilience des pays et des communautés et éviter la souffrance humaine. Je remercie les pays qui ont d'ores et déjà augmenté leurs engagements, en particulier ceux qui ont doublé leur contribution au Fonds vert pour le climat. J'en appelle à votre audace. Avançons vers une transformation planétaire de la finance, une finance compatible avec un monde neutre en carbone. Chers amis, ce sommet n'est pas censé résoudre tous nos problèmes du jour au lendemain, mais il doit donner l'élan nécessaire pour activement mettre en œuvre les objectifs des accords de Paris. La dynamique créée ici aujourd'hui doit guider nos prochaines rencontres. La conférence des Nations Unies sur le climat qui aura lieu en décembre au Chili et l'année prochaine, la conférence sur le transport durable à Beijing, la conférence sur les océans à Lisbonne, la conférence sur la biodiversité à Kunming et le sommet sur la nature à New York. N'ayons pas peur d'être ambitieux, n'ayons pas peur d'accentuer la pression et surtout n'ayons pas peur de sans cesse rappeler la vérité et la réalité de la situation. Adressons aux dirigeants politiques et aux acteurs des marchés le message suivant. La transition vers une économie verte aboutira à de meilleures conditions de vie, à de meilleurs emplois, à une meilleure santé, à une meilleure sécurité alimentaire, à davantage d'égalité et à une croissance durable. Si nous avançons ensemble, personne ne sera laissé de côté. Dear friends, science tells us that our current path we face at least 3 degrees Celsius of global heating by the end of the century. I will not be there, but my granddaughters will, and your grandchildren too. I refuse to be an accomplice in the destruction of their own and only home. I will not be a silent witness to the crime of dooming our present and destroying their right to a sustainable future. It is my obligation, our obligation, to do everything to stop the climate crisis before it stops us. Time is running out, but it's not too late. So let us heed the calls of wise leaders, religious, business, and especially young people who are taking to the streets to demand that we change our relationship with nature now. Let us lace up our running shoes and win the climate race for us all. Thank you.
Hello, New York City. This is the biggest climate strike in history.
There's no planet B, so we have to make our difference now.
This is the moment and the movement of our lifetime. Do you feel it?
We need to take part in this conversation right now.
We heard from youth yesterday all around the world, and today we're getting into action. We're getting into solutions.
The project I'm presenting to you today works with biology as a storage device.
We are building a climate solution.
The one-stop solution for farmers.
We don't want fossil fuels anymore.
What the youth and grassroots movements are doing is absolutely essential.
We have had enough of talking. There's no more time to talk.
Listen to the science.
We have to keep doing this until the leaders of the world start actually making changes.
This is an emergency and our lives are at risk.
How many children will it take for adults to listen to scientists?
Here we go. As you can see from the film, it is indeed young people demanding a response for climate change around the world. And this past weekend, the youth had an opportunity to speak with the Secretary General. The SG now has the opportunity to showcase their views on the topic here with us. And I'm delighted to welcome to the stage Paloma Costa in the center. Anurag Saha Roy and Greta Thunberg. Paloma, let me begin with you. You're a lawyer who leads youth activists and climate activists in Brazil, many of whom are on the front lines of this climate emergency. Why is this issue so urgent to you, and what is your ask of world leaders?
Well, thank you, Mr. Secretary General, for getting all of us here together. Yes, my name is Paloma Costa, and I am from Brazil. I am a social environmentalist defender, a bicycle activist, a climate educator, and a youth mobilizer. I have witnessed how indigenous, traditional communities, and other minority groups are being impacted by the climate crisis. You know, back in Brazil, a great indigenous leader recently said that indigenous people have been resisting since the beginning. What about us? Are we going to be able to resist? Well, youth are mobilized. We are not going to work with industries that deforestate. We are not going to be silent. We have already changed our habits, and you are not following us. Indigenous people have all of this knowledge and connection with our earth, and we still fail to listen to them. But they unite themselves to protect their territory. Why can't we do the same to protect our home? In the past few weeks, the world watched the Amazon fires with horror. I saw the whole world praying for our forests and our indigenous people fighting for survival. We don't need praying, we need acting. And the response we've seen is not enough. So I asked myself, do we need to see the Amazon burn to start doing something? I don't think so. Since my first climate strike with Greta here at COP24, 500 million trees have been destroyed in the Amazon. And people still come to me and ask if I am afraid to defend our forests. Well, as environmental defenders are in great risk, I would like to say that I am not afraid. I am afraid of dying by the climate crisis. We are living through a climate emergency, and it is affecting our food security, our health, our lives. And we have the solutions for both resiliency and mitigation. We live now in a world divided, while we have here the greatest brands. There are still people outside here and inside here as well asking themselves if the climate crisis is real or not. Well, it is. The Secretary General, he challenged the whole world. And I've been working closely with the UN to help build the Youth Climate Summit last Saturday with the Youth Working Group. I know everyone here is ready. I know that. Will you stop the talk so we can turn solutions into actionable commitments? Or should we wait until next year when we gather here together again? Well, if I want to ask something from our leaders, I will probably say that I want all nations to declare a climate emergency. So this will start being the #1 agenda for all leaders. My demand here is not a mere symbolic declaration, but a genuine commitment to the environment and to regional and traditional people who have protected the environment for centuries and are still being oppressed. I will keep educating youth, defending human and environmental rights, listening to my fellow youth and indigenous people here, to build the climate agenda in Brazil with no excuses. So I don't want to hear excuses here. Now it's your turn to make history and take urgent action to guarantee a safe future for all of us. Let's do this together. We are here now. It's our time. Thank you.
Thank you, Paloma. Anurag, at the Youth Climate Summit on Saturday, you were selected as the winner of the Young Entrepreneurs Competition. Congratulations. Can you tell us more about what you're doing as an innovator to combat the climate crisis, and what do you think world leaders can do to support young entrepreneurs like yourself?
Hello, I'm Anurag, originally from India, and an entrepreneur currently based out of Singapore. And thank you for having me here today. Thank you for turning up here today. Like Paloma just said, it is true that we are in a climate emergency, and we, the youth, we are caught in the middle. But fortunately for us, the youth are also the ones who are building the solutions to a lot of the climate change problems. Following a call by the SG's Office of Youth Envoy and the Office of Information and Communications Technology, during this last summer, my team and I, we worked on building a platform that allows farmers in remote communities of Africa who do not have a smartphone or who do not have internet to access high-quality weather updates. They need this because their economy is based on agriculture, and without these updates, this information, they can no longer survive because climate change has put them in a position where their agriculture is completely affected. Now, entrepreneurship and technological innovation, these are going to be the two major pillars if we are to build climate-resilient systems, if we are to fight climate change without relying solely on government policy. Which is why it is important that the governments involve and incentivize the youth. And they bring out the innovators, they bring out the entrepreneurs, and we do the best that we can to bridge the digital divide. Like we already know, the technology is on the side of the youth, but not everybody has access to it. And the ones who don't have access to it are the ones most affected by climate change, the ones most vulnerable to the world. Now, my message to the leaders out here today, my message as a young entrepreneur, is that we are expecting support. We have had enough of action plans, enough of policies, enough of statements, commitments. What we need right now is we need active support. And by active support, what we mean is that we entrepreneurs, when we start a company, we need tax breaks. We need you to support us by streamlining processes. Starting a business is so difficult right now. Why? We need ease of doing business. We need startup grants. And this is what the youth are expecting. These young people, they're risking their careers, they're risking their stable jobs, all to build solutions that can save the planet Earth. And as the leaders of the world, the least that you guys can do is provide them with a conducive platform, a platform that helps them scale their solutions. And I don't think there's a lot to ask, right? That's the least that you can do. And when we are here today to support the youth and innovation and entrepreneurship. So let's come together and ensure that we do all that we can to support these young kids, I'm one of them, to build solutions that can save the earth. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anurag. Greta, your first climate strike was a lonely event a little over a year ago. And in the intervening time, you have sparked the interest of millions, literally, of children around the globe, demanding action for climate change. What's your message to world leaders today?
My message is that we'll be watching you. This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words, and yet I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering, people are dying, entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you? For more than 30 years, the science has been crystal clear. How dare you continue to look away and come here saying that you're doing enough when the politics and solutions needed are still nowhere in sight? You say you hear us and that you understand the urgency. But no matter how sad and angry I am, I do not want to believe that. Because if you really understood the situation and still kept on failing to act, then you would be evil, and that I refuse to believe. The popular idea of cutting our emissions in half in 10 years only gives us a 50% chance of staying below 1.5 degrees and the risk of setting off irreversible chain reactions beyond human control. 50% may be acceptable to you, but those numbers do not include tipping points, most feedback loops, additional warming hidden by toxic air pollution, or the aspects of equity and climate justice. They also rely on my generation sucking hundreds of billions of tons of your CO2 out of the air with technologies that barely exist. So a 50% risk is simply not acceptable to us, we who have to live with the consequences. To have a 67% chance of staying below a 1.5 degrees of global temperature rise, the best odds given by the IPCC, the world had 420 gigatons of CO2 left to emit back on January 1st, 2018. Today, that figure is already down to less than 350 gigatons. How dare you pretend that this can be solved with just business as usual and some technical solutions? With today's emissions levels, that remaining CO2 budget will be entirely gone within less than 8.5 years. There will not be any solutions or plans presented in line with these figures here today, because these numbers are too uncomfortable and you are still not mature enough to tell it like it is. You are failing us, but the young people are starting to understand your betrayal. The eyes of all future generations are upon you. And if you choose to fail us, I say we will never forgive you. We will not let you get away with this. Right here, right now, is where we draw the line. The world is waking up, and change is coming whether you like it or not. Thank you.
Well, I would like to thank our three distinguished guests of this morning very much for their very eloquent testimony, and to say that what is amazing in today's youth movement is not only that they are leading the gaining of conscience, the raising of awareness, making sure that the whole world becomes committed to climate action, but that they are also on the ground working to provide solutions. And we heard testimonies that are very important about what young people are doing to do what needs to be done in order for climate action to be rooted in the action across the world. And so I believe it's the duty of all decision makers in the world not only to listen to the voice of young people and to do what they ask us to do, but also to support them in their own action for climate action around the world. Thank you very much to all of you.
Thank you. Thank you, Secretary General, and for your powerful remarks. Thank you, Anurag, and Paloma, and Greta. Thank you so much. And now I'd like you to watch a personal message by His Holiness Pope Francis.
La cumbre sobre la acción climática ONU 2019. Quisiera dar las gracias al secretario general de las Naciones Unidas, el señor Antonio Guterres, por la convocatoria de este encuentro, así como por haber atraído la atención de los jefes de Estado y de Gobierno, de toda la comunidad internacional y de la opinión pública mundial, sobre uno de los fenómenos más graves y preocupantes que está viviendo nuestra época, el cambio climático. Se trata de uno de los principales desafíos que debemos afrontar, y para ello la humanidad está llamada a cultivar tres grandes cualidades morales: honestidad, responsabilidad y valentía. Con el Acuerdo de París del 12 de diciembre de 2015, la comunidad internacional tomó conciencia de la urgencia y necesidad de dar una respuesta colectiva para colaborar en la construcción de nuestra casa común. Sin embargo, pasados 4 años de aquel acuerdo histórico, se observa cómo los compromisos contraídos por los Estados todavía
are
son muy
still
flojos
very weak.
y están lejos de alcanzar
Indeed,
los
they are
objetivos
far from
previstos.
achieving the objectives set.
Junto a tantas iniciativas, no
Along
solo
with so
por parte
many
de los
initiatives,
gobiernos,
not
sino
only
de
by
toda la
governments,
sociedad
but
civil,
by civil society
es necesario
as a
preguntarse
whole, it
si
is
existe
necessary
una
to ask
verdadera voluntad
whether there is a real
política
political will
para destinar
to
mayores
allocate greater
recursos
human,
humanos,
financial, and
financieros y
technological
tecnológicos
resources
a fin de
to
mitigar
mitigate
los
the
efectos
negative
negativos
effects
del
of
cambio
climate
climático
change
y ayudar a
and
las
to help the
poblaciones
poorest
más
and
pobres
most
y
vulnerable
vulnerables, que
populations
son las que más lo sufren.
who suffer the most.
Aunque la situación no es
While the
buena y el
solution
planeta
is not
sufre,
good and
la
the planet
ventana
is
para una
suffering,
oportunidad está
the window of opportunity is still open.
My apologies. As you can see, we're having some technical difficulties with His Holiness's message. We're hoping to get it restarted momentarily. Stand by. We'll hope to bring you the rest of his message at a later moment, but at this point, let's move forward. The Secretary General has asked member states to come ready to share with us their plans for enhancing ambition by 2020 and reaching a carbon-neutral world by 2050. We will now hear from 4 leaders ready to announce their ambitious goals and plans. I encourage all member states to keep their interventions to no more than 3 minutes and all other participants to 2 minutes. An ambitious plan can be presented in that time. I would request all to respect those time limits as we can hear from all invitees to the summit. I will return to the stage to visually remind speakers that time is of the essence. And with that, I would like to now invite to the stage Her Excellency Jacinda Ardern, Prime Minister of New Zealand. Prime Minister, please tell us your plan.
Kia ora koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui kia koutou a malo ni. Your Excellencies, recently I visited the remote atolls of Tokelau in the South Pacific. With a population of 1,500 people that is only accessible by boat, they have a story not often heard, but a message that must be shared. It's a message underscored by their new coastal walls, which are already toppling over as a result of the assault by the sea, by the seaside burial grounds, which are eroding and shifting, and by the children who tell you they are worried about the future of their home. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a message of urgency, one the Secretary General himself heard when he visited the Pacific recently. But if we are to overcome the extraordinary threat that climate change poses, we must all start with an honest appraisal of ourselves. Although New Zealand accounts for only 0.17% of global total emissions, our gross emissions have increased roughly 23% since 1990. But also, as with many here, things are starting to turn around. There is hope. Our gross emissions peaked in 2006. Over 80% of our electricity already comes from renewable hydro and wind, and we have begun an ambitious agenda. We have introduced to Parliament the Zero Carbon Bill, the purpose of which is to ensure New Zealand lives within the threshold of 1.5 degrees Celsius of global warming, necessary to avoid catastrophic weather events for our Pacific neighbours. We are strengthening our emissions trading scheme to more effectively price climate pollution. We aim to plant 1 billion trees by 2028. We have stopped issuing any new permits for offshore oil and gas exploration. In their place, we're investing in green hydrogen, biofuels, and the goal of 100% renewable electricity generation by 2023. We're making electric and cleaner cars more affordable. We're investing heavily in rail, trains, buses, walking and cycling infrastructure. We've established a $100 million green investment fund to help shift private investment towards the zero carbon economy of the future. And we've created a $300 million fund aimed at supporting climate mitigation and adaptation in the Pacific. And we've done all of that in just 2 years. Our business community is stepping up with a Climate Leaders Coalition that together represents fully 60% of New Zealand's gross emissions. Our farming leaders have made their own commitment to cutting emissions as a result of food production. Over the next 5 years, we will collaborate to build systems that every farmer will be able to use to measure, manage and reduce their own farm's emissions. We are determined to show that New Zealand can and will be the most sustainable food producer in the world. And we will continue to lead international collaboration through the Global Research Alliance on Agricultural Greenhouse Gases. Mr. Secretary-General, the situation is stark, but New Zealand will play our part in the global effort. It will not be easy, but our generation, we have it within our grasp not just to prevent the worst, but to build the best possible world for the generations to come. For Tokelau, for the Pacific, for all of us. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
I would now like to invite to the stage Her Excellency Hilda Heine, President of the Republic of the Marshall Islands.
Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, Yahweh, good morning. As President of a low-lying coral atoll nation, I stand before you as a representative of the most climate vulnerable people on Earth. We are also one of the most ambitious countries when it comes to the global fight against the climate crisis. Mr. Secretary General, in the spirit of the Paris Agreement and in line with your call to every country, we have already submitted a second and more ambitious nationally determined contribution, as well as a decarbonization strategy to reach net zero emissions by 2050. Other countries must now follow our lead. Yesterday, 15 countries of the I Ambition coalition led by the Marshall Islands issued a statement on, quote, uniting behind the science to step up ambition by 2020, unquote. And the Climate Vulnerable Forum, which we chair, has also shown its determination to lead from the front. We are now calling on others to join us, including by joining yesterday's statement. Excellencies, we are far from staying within the 1.5-degree limit set by the Paris Agreement. Falling short would mean the greatest failure of humanity that we have ever seen. As the Global Commission on Adaptation has said, not enough is being done to adapt our world to the impacts that we have already locked in, let alone the worst that would yet to come. I join fellow Pacific Island Forum leaders in affirming that the climate crisis remains the single greatest threat to our regional security. That is why my government has submitted a resolution to our Parliament to declare a national climate crisis including to highlight the special circumstances we face as a low-lying coral atoll nation. We are also developing a landmark national adaptation plan to shore up our own future. 5 years ago, my baby granddaughter, Mother Filipina, was on this very stage. I am here for her and for all the children of the Marshall Islands. As a president, mother, and grandmother, I want to ensure that women and youth have a voice in decision-making that shapes their future. That is why the Conquest Pledge is important. I call on every leader that have not yet signed it to do so. The summit must be the moment we choose survival over selfishness, communities over coal, and planet over profits. It must be about climate justice. Mr. Secretary General, your call is clear, brave, and timely. To sustain action into the long term, next year countries must submit their plans to increase ambition by 2030 and to reach net zero emissions by 2050. This is the lens through which history will judge this summit and all of us. The time has come for leaders to do just that. Lead. Komoltada, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency. I now invite to the stage His Excellency Narendra Modi, Prime Minister of India.
Namaste.
Good morning.
Excellencies.
Excellencies.
मैं ग्लोबल क्लाइमेट समिट के आयोजन के लिए
I thank
UN
Secretary General for organizing the Global Climate Action Summit.
पिछले वर्ष Champion of the
After
Earth
having received the Champion of the Earth award last year,
UN में मेरा
this
ये
is
पहला
my
संबोधन
first opportunity to address the United Nations.
और ये भी सुखद संयोग है
And it is a happy
कि न्यूयॉर्क
coincidence
दौरे में मेरी पहली
that
सभा
the subject of my
climate विषय
first
पर हो
meeting
रही है।
in New York is climate.
Excellencies,
Excellencies,
climate change को लेकर दुनिया भर में
various efforts
अनेक प्रयास
are
हो रहे
being made by different countries
लेकिन
to
हमें
fight
ये बात
climate
स्वीकारनी
change.
होगी
But we must
कि
accept
गंभीर चुनौती
that
का
if
मुकाबला
we
करने
have
के
to
लिए
overcome a serious
उतना नहीं
challenge
किया
like
जा रहा
climate
है
change, then
जितना
what we
कि
are doing at the moment
होना
is
बहुत
just
अनिवार्य है।
not enough.
आज जरूरत है
What is needed today
एक comprehensive approach
is
की
a comprehensive
जिसमें
approach
education,
which covers education, values,
और lifestyle से
and
लेकर
everything from
development
lifestyle to
philosophy
developmental
भी शामिल
philosophy.
हो। आज जरूरत है
What we need
behavioral
is a
change के
global
लिए एक
people's
विश्वव्यापी
movement to
जन
bring
आंदोलन
about
खड़ा करने
behavioral change.
प्रकृति का सम्मान
The respect for
और
nature
नेचुरल रिसोर्स का संरक्षण
and the protection of
ये हमारी
natural
परंपरा
resources have been
और वर्तमान
important
प्रयासों का हिस्सा
aspects
रहा
of both our traditions and
Need.
present-day efforts.
not greed
Need,
has been our
not greed, has
guiding
been
principle.
our guiding principle.
और इसलिए
And therefore,
आज भारत इस विषय
India
पर
is here today
सिर्फ बात करने नहीं
not just to talk about
बल्कि एक
the
व्यवहारिक
seriousness
सोच
of this issue,
और road map
but
के
to
साथ
present a practical approach and a
We believe
roadmap.
that
We believe
an ounce
that an
of
ounce
practice
of practice
is
is worth
more than
more than
a ton,
a ton
of
of preaching.
हम भारत में
In
के
India,
फ्यूल मिक्स में
We are going
Non-fossil
to
fuel की
increase
हिस्सेदारी
the share of
बढ़ा रहे हैं।
non-fossil fuel in our fuel mix
हम
and
2022 तक
increase by 2022
renewable energy में
our renewable
अपनी
energy
capacity को
capacity to
175 गीगावाट तक ले जा रहे
175
हैं
gigawatts,
और आगे
and
हम
we are
इसे
committed to
450
further increasing
गीगावाट
this to
ले जाने के लिए प्रतिबद्ध
450 gigawatts.
हम अपने परिवहन क्षेत्र में
we are encouraging e-mobility in our transport sector. India is also working to considerably increase the percentage of the biofuel blended in petrol and diesel. We have given gas connections for clean cooking to 150 million families. We have started the Jal Jeevan mission for water conservation, rainwater harvesting, and for the development of water resources. And in the next few years, India is going to spend approximately $50 billion on this. Excellencies, if we talk about our actions at the international level, about 80 countries have joined our International Solar Alliance initiative. I am very pleased that India and Sweden, together with other partners, are launching the leadership group within the Industry Transition Track by bringing governments and the private sector together. This initiative will play an important role in developing low-carbon pathways for industry. In order to make our infrastructure resilient in the face of disasters, India is launching a coalition for disaster-resilient infrastructure. I invite all member states to join this coalition. This year, on the occasion of India's Independence Day on the 15th of August, we called for a people's movement to end the use of single-use plastic. I hope that this will create an awareness at a global level against single-use plastic. Excellencies, I am pleased to let you know that tomorrow we are going to inaugurate the solar panels installed by India on the roof of the UN building. The time to talk for talking is over. The world needs to act now.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I would now invite to the stage Her Excellency Angela Merkel, Chancellor of Germany.
Meine Damen und Herren,
Ladies and gentlemen,
liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, wir alle haben den Weckruf der Jugend gehört. Und ich möchte dem Generalsekretär Antonio Guterres ganz herzlich danken, dass er dieses Ereignis hier abhält im Vorfeld der Generalversammlung.
And for young people also to meet here before the General Assembly. There can be no doubt whatsoever that climate change, global warming, is primarily caused by human beings. And this is why we have to heed the advice of our scientific communities. It is a global challenge that can only be met if we stand together, because we only have one planet, all of us together. So the yardstick for our action needs to be the Paris Climate Agreement that puts down a framework that will allow us to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees. The industrial nations are those that have caused global warming as we see it today. The developing countries are those that suffer most from this phenomenon. And this is why, as we, as representatives of the industrialized countries, have the obligation to put our technology, the best of our knowledge and our finances into stopping global warming. As we know, Germany sees its responsibility on the international stage and on the national stage. Internationally, we shall increase our funding for global climate protection from 2 to 4 billion euros compared to 2014. In particular, we will earmark 1.5 billion and pay this into the Green Climate Fund. We are working for resilience, climate insurance policy, and we have been active for years and we will continue to do so in protection of forests. At the national level, we have the following situation. Germany
well, is 1% of the global population and stands for 2% of global emissions. If each and every one around the planet would act as we do it, global emissions would double, and everyone is more than aware of what this means. So by 2030, we want to reduce our CO2 emissions by 55% compared to the base year of 1990, and in 2050 we want to be climate neutral. In 2030, we want to get two-thirds of our energy from renewables in 2022. We will phase out the last of our nuclear power plants. At the latest, in 2038, we will phase out coal. We shall initiate a turnaround in our transport sector over the next few years, and also as regards the insulation, for example, of buildings, we have earmarked for the next 3 years 55 billion for innovation, for technology, for new mobility, in insulation of houses and in new heating. We will invest this money in these areas, and we will introduce a CO2 pricing, not to the extent that we are already doing it right now in the European Union for industry and energy. We shall also enhance this, first at a national level and later on, hopefully, also at the European-wide level, by pricing in transport and insulation of buildings, because we think that only if we develop a convincing pricing scheme will we be able to use what is left by way of a sort of limit and will not be increasing that. We obviously have to put down the necessary incentives in order to take people along. There are people down out in the streets who protest and who try to convince us, but there are also those who are still doubtful that climate change actually exists. And we have to try and take these people along. We in Germany have tried to do this by the measures we agreed on last Friday, by what we have done so far. We will give a contribution to a sustainable business and to sustainable management, and we shall give our contribution to these funds also globally. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. Our next presenters represent member states, the private sector, and local authorities that are committed to a carbon-neutral world. Let us hear next from them. I invite now His Excellency Sebastián Pinera Echenique, President of Chile, His Excellency Sauli Niinistö, President of Finland, Mr. Michael Bloomberg, UN Special Envoy, Ms. Valérie Plante, Mayor of the City of Montreal, and the CEO of Alliance, Mr. Oliver Bäte, to take the stage. President Pinera, as leader of the country hosting the next COP, you have the floor to let us know your plan.
Thank you. Muy buenas tardes. Bueno, el hombre es la criatura más inteligente que habita la Tierra.
Humans are the most intelligent creatures living on Earth, but also the only ones able to destroy their own planet, and that is the contradiction we must face. Climate change signs are conclusive. This is not an issue of ideology or belief. It is science. We must listen better to science. All of the prognoses show that we're on the wrong track. Just one example, the last 5 years are going to be the hottest temperatures that ever have been recorded in the history of humanity. As a consequence, there is no doubt whatsoever that faced with this reality, we must change the way that we do things. For a long time now, nature has been crying out in agony. saying, protect me, care for me, so that I can protect and care for you. The planet, nature, can exist without us. We cannot exist without them. That is why the commitment that we countries are making today is essential. Today we have the highest concentration of greenhouse gases in the last 800,000 years. Consequently, there are two options. Either we wait and see what happens and we face the consequences, or we decide to change the course of history and do what we should have done a long time ago. For that reason, we countries must recognize that reality has gone beyond us, that the scope of climate change and global warming and their perverse effects are going a lot faster than what we ourselves and scientists had anticipated. This is why, with great commitment and enthusiasm, we take up the task set us by the Secretary General, and I thank him for convening us, to make progress on two fronts, in terms of mitigation and adaptation. With the assistance of the United Nations, in a short time, we have managed to have 30 countries commit to carbon neutrality before 2050, and 66 countries have announced a commitment to achieve more ambitious, more demanding goals than those NDCs to be determined at the COP25 in Chile this year. The most important recent event was the Osaka summit, where countries like England, Germany, France, Spain, Holland, and Chile committed themselves to be carbon neutral. Chile is making progress with four major tools. First of all, achieving full decarbonization of its energy matrix and replacing it with clean, renewable energies from the earth, water, and the oceans. The second is changing our public transportation system from fossil fuels to electricity. The third is to set demanding standards of energy efficiency in all sectors. And the fourth is an ambitious reforestation plan. Chile is one of the countries that has a specific characteristic, one of the few countries in the world where the forest mass is growing and not shrinking. For all these reasons, besides the commitment of moving from a culture based on everything being disposable to a culture where everything is recyclable, and from a linear to a circular economy where everything is reused, Chile is setting a clear path. Commitment is not only to nature, it is a moral commitment to ourselves, to our children, to our grandchildren, and to all the coming generations. As was so aptly said this morning, they have the right to live on Earth, and it would be very sad for them not to be able to see blue skies and green fields, except in history books. So in COP25 in Chile, we will have the most ambitious demands and expectations. And we will also incorporate care for the forests and of the oceans as priorities as part of the fight against climate change and global warming. The time for action has finally come. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. President Niinistö, Finland is aiming at carbon neutrality before 2050. We'd love to hear your outline for your plans to achieve this.
Thank you. First, I would like to thank Mr. Secretary General for his leadership in convening us here today. I hope that we make history today. The scientific evidence and case for the urgency of climate action is beyond all doubt. We have to do something. We heard young people during the weekend earlier on today here. The question, or what Greta Thunberg said, they will be watching us and they will not let us go. This must be taken very seriously. I start from Finland by telling that we try to convince ordinary Finnish people to take notice in their daily life on climate change. We tell them that it doesn't limit your life if you start looking at your waste of food or recycling your needs and deeds, or later on more demanding, like, do I really have to do all the trips I'm aiming to do or used to do? Because surely they know that one individual can't have that much impact, but the mindset is here most important. If everybody has a mindset in keeping in mind that my behavior has an impact to climate change, such a mindset would spread to us politicians. It would be easier to make decisions if we know that people understand it. To business life, that would also enlarge the mindset. Secondly, just before this meeting, I received a message from Lord Nicholas Stern. He wrote, "Ambition depends on finance, and finance follows ambition." Finland and Chile have together collected a coalition of finance ministers. There are 40 of them now. They have agreed on Helsinki principles. The idea is that systematically in ministers of finance, they will study while talking about taxation, budgets, innovations, investments. They will also check what is the environmental impact, what is its impact on climate change. This means a systematic process. And I understand, Mr. Bloomberg, that you have planned something quite similar to corporates. That is very positive. Then to Finland itself, our national climate targets belong now to the most ambitious ones in the world. Our government is committed to achieving carbon neutrality by 2033. We aim to become carbon negative soon after that, as the first industrial economy in the world. The bar is very high, but we want to lead by example. We need to accelerate our emission reductions, and we need to strengthen our carbon sinks. But we know that new technologies and innovations will help in this. Moreover, we have a very solid record on our earlier commitments. In 2015, Finland was among the first countries to adopt the Climate Act. We have banned the use of coal in energy production by 2029. The use of fossil oils in heating will end by 2030. To conclude, let me assure you that we in Finland are fully committed to decisive climate actions, globally, in coalition with others, and nationally. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. And now, former Mayor Michael Bloomberg, as UN Special Envoy for Climate Change, you've been a leader, a front runner for climate action, including to help lead the fight to end coal use. What are some of the most important action items you can discuss to reach net zero emissions?
Well, let me start by thanking President Pinera of Chile and President Niinisto of Finland for their leadership on this issue. They are spearheading the coalition of finance ministers for climate action, which is also working to increase transparency around climate change. And President Pinera's leadership will be critical in the upcoming climate summit in Chile. That summit is an excellent opportunity to put today's commitments into action. And let me also thank President Trump for coming today to the United Nations. Hopefully our discussions here will be useful for you when you formulate climate policy. The most important thing that we can do is to phase out coal as fast as possible, and we are making progress. Since we started Beyond Coal in 2011, more than half of the United States' coal plants have closed, 297 out of 530. Through Beyond Coal, we'll close every remaining one of those. Net zero emissions is an ambitious but achievable goal, and non-state actors can lead the way. A growing number of U.S. cities and states and businesses have committed to reaching net zero emissions. These states would by themselves form the world's fourth largest economy. The Secretary General has called for no new coal plants to be built after 2020. That would be an enormous step in the fight against climate change, and it would save a lot of lives. So today, Bloomberg Philanthropies is expanding our global coal work with the aim of reaching the goal the Secretary General has called for, no new coal plants after 2020. And we will work with countries around the world to accelerate plans for new clean energy projects. We'll bring together public and private sector leaders to share technical expertise and help make the economic case for clean energy. We have a lot of work to do ahead, but there's nothing we can't achieve if all sectors of society work together. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. Bloomberg. Mayor Plante, you've committed your city of Montreal to be carbon neutral. I guess the question is, why does this make sense for your city, and how will you be able to achieve it?
Merci beaucoup. Je suis très heureuse d'être ici en tant que mairesse de Montréal, située bien sûr au Canada, et je parle pour l'ensemble des villes à travers la planète qui sont engagées dans la lutte au changement climatique. Quand on sait qu'en 2050, 2 tiers de la population mondiale sera dans les villes, dans les centres urbains, alors il faut se poser la question, et nous devons être plus résilients.
How can we make ourselves more resilient? I hope that what you take from my statement is that cities are already committing and are already working actively to combat climate change, but that there is much more that we can do, and that we are dedicated to doing the extra things we have to do, but we need more support from states, but also from the private sector. That's absolutely essential. The Secretary General set ambitious objectives for states in reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 45% by 2030, and also by achieving carbon neutrality by 2050. And I can say that cities are ready. We are ready to respond to these commitments, even if certain cities such as Montreal has already gone further. The Secretary General has asked us today to make strong gestures. In talking about Montreal, we are trying to increase our objectives by reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 55% by 2030. It's a very ambitious objective, we know, but we know exactly what we have to do. And cities know what they have to do. They know, for example, that we need to reduce the use of cars with just one person in the car. We also know that we have to make our buildings carbon neutral. I'd like to hail the Zero Carbon Building Initiative that will be launched this week. It's a very good initiative. We also should know that cities don't act alone. We know that we're lucky to be in various networks. There's the C40 network, and there's the Global Covenant of Mayors as well. And these networks give us the necessary energy and allow us to share best practices. With that in mind, as the ambassador for local
Je tiens à rappeler que la lutte au changement climatique, elle est bien sûr absolument nécessaire et importante pour nos populations, mais également pour préserver la biodiversité locale. Je pense bien sûr à la faune et à la flore. Et pour agir là-dessus, il faut des gestes concrets, encore une fois. Et je tiens à donner l'exemple de Montréal. J'ai pris la décision de stopper, d'arrêter un projet immobilier qui aurait détruit les derniers grands espaces verts de Montréal et qui aurait encouragé la venue d'à peu près 10 000 voitures. Et en faisant ce geste, en disant je change de paradigme, je laisse de côté les objectifs financiers pour m'assurer de préserver des espaces verts et humides, selon moi, ce sont des gestes de ce type que les villes peuvent mener. D'ailleurs, parlant de biodiversité, je vous invite tous à la COP 15 l'année prochaine et les objectifs sont grands. Alors j'espère que vous serez au rendez-vous. En terminant, quand il est question de lutter, la lutte au changement climatique, je pense qu'il ne faut pas oublier les autres luttes qui sont interconnectées, celle de la justice sociale, celle de préserver ou de s'assurer que les communautés les plus vulnérables font partie de la solution, qu'elles se sentent interpellées et qu'on s'occupe d'elles, les enjeux des populations autochtones également. Et en finale, un petit mot pour les jeunes qui sont mobilisés. Je veux les remercier. Je veux les remercier parce que je les remercie de nous pousser, de nous talonner, nous, les acteurs de la société civile, du secteur privé, les chefs d'État, les maires et les mairesses, de nous pousser à répondre présent face à la menace climatique. Je pense que les jeunes nous rappellent à tous les jours que cette terre, on ne l'hérite pas de nos ancêtres, nous l'empruntons à nos enfants.
Merci. Thank you, Mayor. Our last presenter for the first theme of carbon neutrality comes from the private sector. Oliver Bata, CEO of Alliance SE, has an exciting announcement from the financial sector. Mr. Bata, you have the floor.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary General, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thank you for having the opportunity to speak to you. As the CEO of Europe's largest institutional investor, I have the honor today to speak for and be a part of a group of 12 large asset owners that have come together to address climate change as one of the most pressing challenges of our time, not anymore by observing, by acting. We are the principal holders of retirement savings, of insurance premiums. We are often asked why we're not moving ahead, and we are. Together, this group has decided on the allocation of more than $2.4 trillion globally, and is growing every day. Together, we've decided we can drive change, not just in the investment world, but in the real world. Together, with the support of the environment and its partners, we have built the UN-convened Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance that we are presenting today for the first time. Today, we commit to full transition of all our investment portfolios to net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, with strong intermediary targets every 5 years. Thank you. Just to be clear what this means, that the global economy, which we strongly influence, reflected in our portfolios, needs to move rapidly from 37 gigatons to 3 gigatons annually before 2050. This is a very ambitious journey, we know that, but we also believe it's a huge business opportunity and also an economic imperative, not just a societal one. Jointly, we will advocate for corporate and industry action by engaging with companies to change their business practices to ensure net zero carbon emissions. So it's not just about investment and divestment, it's about dialogue. We do invite all other investment and asset owners globally to join in this alliance to really shape a powerful movement. First and foremost, by the way, the sovereign wealth funds. There should be no reasons why government-controlled money cannot support us. And we do this with the expectations that our own governments will follow through their own commitments to the Paris Agreement. We will hold them accountable as well. We heard this morning from our young generation and our own children's. We have to do something, and the service sector should not just follow, it has to lead. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Bata. Thank you, Mr. Bata. Thank you to all the presenters on our panel on carbon neutrality. We're going to move now to another key topic in our global efforts to combat climate change, and that is finance. The Secretary General invited France, Germany, and Qatar to lead the efforts in this area towards the summit. Therefore, it is my honor now to invite His Excellency Emmanuel Macron, President of France, His Highness Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, Emir of Qatar, and His Excellency Andrew Holness, Prime Minister of Jamaica, to take the floor. I'd like to take this moment to urge all of the presenters today to be mindful of the time constraints, limited to 3 minutes per remarks. Thank you so much. Nice to meet you. Pleasure.
No, I understand French. I'm okay.
Monsieur le Président, you are an advocate for more climate ambition, no doubt. Why is this fight so important to you and to your President Macron?
Okay. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Mesdames, Messieurs, chers collègues,
Ladies
Mesdames,
and
Messieurs les chefs
gentlemen,
d'État
colleagues,
et de
heads of
gouvernement,
state,
Mesdames, Messieurs les
government,
ministres,
ministers,
chers amis,
friends.
juste en quelques mots. D'abord, moi j'ai été très frappé de l'émotion
In a
tout à
few
l'heure.
words, I
Lorsque
was very
quelques-uns des
struck
jeunes
by
se sont
the
exprimés, j'ai eu
emotion
l'occasion
in the
d'échanger
room when
avec
some of the young people
quelques
spoke
autres. Et
earlier.
nous
I
avons
was
dans
lucky
beaucoup de
to
nos
speak to
pays,
some of them, and in many of our
chaque semaine,
countries,
depuis des mois et des mois, nos jeunesses qui
each week for
s'expriment. Et je
months and
crois
months
qu'elles
now, we've had
disent
young people
une urgence
speaking,
absolue à
and I
laquelle
think
nous ne
they've
saurions
identified an
répondre ici en
absolute
disant
urgency
tout va
that we
bien,
have to respond to
regardez, on
here.
fait ce qu'il faut.
We
Et
need
cette
to
urgence
say,
absolue nous dit
we're
une
doing
chose,
what's
vous n'allez pas
necessary.
assez vite.
But
Même quand vous
things
êtes
aren't going
conscient de ce
quick
qui ne va
enough.
pas,
Even if you're
vous n'allez
aware
pas assez
of
vite.
things that aren't
Elle nous dit
working, you're
aussi
not
sans
going
doute,
quick enough. That's one of
vous
the
ne
things
nous
they're saying
associez
to us.
pas
They also say
suffisamment
that we're not
aux réponses que
sufficiently
vous
involved
apportez.
in the response.
Et donc, j'en prends
And
aussi
so
ma part
I
et je
also
l'entends.
want to play my
Et donc,
role in
je crois
listening
qu'aucun
to them.
responsable politique ne peut
I think
rester
that no
sourd à cette
political
exigence
decision
de
maker
justice entre
can
les
remain
générations.
deaf
Et je crois
at this
aujourd'hui
call
que
for justice
collectivement,
between generations, and I think that
notre
collectively,
jeunesse, nos
our young
sociétés,
people,
nos entreprises,
our
nos
societies, our
investisseurs,
companies,
les
and our
chefs d'État et de
investors,
gouvernement
heads of state and government
doivent réussir à reconstruire ce qui est une compréhension commune du monde,
rebuild a joint
changer nos
understanding
habitudes
of the
pour
world.
agir
We need to
ensemble.
change our habits so that we
Parce
can
que
work together.
sinon nous risquons d'avoir un
Because
dialogue
if
de
not,
sourds pour longtemps entre la
we will
dénonciation
have
à laquelle aucune action au fond ne suffit à répondre,
these
et de l'autre côté
denunciations
des
that
listes
no
d'actions
action
qui ne
can
sont jamais
respond
suffisantes et on
to,
se
and then
dirait
we'll
à
also have
nous-mêmes,
actions
regardez, on a déjà
that
bien
will be
travaillé.
insufficient, even though we're saying that we're
Donc
doing
le
what
seul
we
moyen
should
d'avoir
be.
des
So
sommets
the only
utiles, d'agir
way to
utilement
have
avec nos sociétés
a
et notre
useful
jeunesse,
form of action
c'est
working with
aussi
our young
d'échanger sur ce qu'on
people
comprend, ce qu'on ne
is
comprend pas,
also
comment on essaie de
to
transformer notre
establish
système collectif
understanding and to
pour
transform
répondre
our
à
collective
cet
system
impératif
to respond
de
to
la
this
lutte contre le réchauffement
imperative
climatique
of
et
the
pour la
fight
biodiversité,
against
et
climate
comment
change and
ensemble on
for
arrive à construire des
biodiversity.
actions
And we
utiles.
need to build
On a besoin de nos
useful
jeunesses dans nos
actions.
pays
We need our
pour nous
young
dire
people
d'aller
in our
plus vite.
countries
On
to
a
tell
besoin
us to work
de cette
faster.
jeunesse pour
We need the young
nous aider
people
à
to
changer les
help us
choses,
to change
à
things,
réparer, à agir, à mettre
to
plus de
act
pression sur celles et ceux
and
qui
to
ne veulent
put
pas
more
bouger,
pressure on those
États,
who are
financeurs,
recalcitrant, whether
entreprises.
they are
Dans ce
states
cadre-là,
or
ce que nous
financiers
avons
or
fait tous les
companies.
trois,
This is what the three
durant
of
ces
us
derniers
have
mois et sous
been
le
doing
mandat
in most
du
recent
secrétaire
months
général des
and
Nations Unies,
following
c'est
the UN
justement
Secretary
d'essayer
General's
d'avancer.
mandate. We're
Et
trying
je
to make
crois qu'il y a un
progress.
agenda
And I
d'action
think
qui
that
n'est
there is
pas
an action agenda
dans la satisfaction de lui-même ou
that
dans
isn't about
le contentement, mais qui peut être un agenda d'action
being
positif.
self-satisfied, but it should be a
D'abord,
positive agenda.
nous devons collectivement,
Firstly,
chefs d'État et de
we as
gouvernement,
heads of state and government
changer
need
la
to work
rapidité de nos
collectively
réponses,
to respond more
rester
quickly.
dans l'accord de Paris
We need to
et être pleinement en
keep
conformité
to
avec
the
ses
Paris
objectifs.
Agreement and to be consistent with its
Premièrement, moi je me
objectives.
félicite aujourd'hui
I'm very
qu'on ait eu la
pleased,
bonne nouvelle
firstly,
de la
today that we've
ratification
had
de
the
l'accord
good
de
news
Paris
of the
par la Russie.
ratification of the
Formidable
Paris Agreement
nouvelle.
by Russia.
Ce
That
n'était
is
pas attendu il y a
wonderful
quelques
news.
mois.
It
Ça montre
wasn't
que les choses
something we
progressent.
expected a few months ago, so that's a sign
Vous
of
pouvez les
progress.
applaudir.
And I think it's worthy of applause.
Deuxième chose, si on veut agir et aller fort, il faut aller vers la neutralité carbone 2050. On a bâti cette coalition qui ne cesse de grandir avec le ralliement du Chili, du Japon, de l'Italie au G7 de Biarritz, l'Inde qui a donné des signes très forts, je sais que la Chine est en train de bouger et c'est un élément essentiel. Dans ce cadre-là, l'Europe doit faire plus. Et donc, dès 2020, l'Europe doit prendre des décisions très claires pour pouvoir exaucer les vœux de la nouvelle présidente, Ursula von der Leyen, d'aller vers des réductions accrues de nos émissions à horizon 2030. Ce fameux moins 55% en 2030, il suppose que l'Europe prenne des décisions l'année prochaine, d'aller plus vite et plus fort sur un ETS ambitieux, un prix du carbone minimum qu'on doit rehausser et un mécanisme d'inclusion carbone aux frontières. C'est indispensable si l'Europe veut être à la hauteur de ce qu'elle se doit à elle-même. Et dans ce cadre-là, la France prendra ses responsabilités. Nous avons d'ores et déjà arrêté toute nouvelle exploration d'hydrocarbures sur le sol français et les dernières centrales à charbon auront fermé leurs portes avant 2022. Maintenant, le deuxième élément de cet agenda positif, c'est pour moi d'avoir un agenda commercial qui soit au service de l'agenda climatique. Je crois, en tout cas une très large majorité d'entre nous, croyons à un monde ouvert, à un monde d'échange, à un monde où précisément on fait du commerce, ce qui est vecteur de paix, ce qui a permis de sortir beaucoup de nos concitoyens de la pauvreté. Néanmoins, aujourd'hui, force est de constater que notre jeunesse, parfois nous-mêmes, ne comprenons plus rien au fonctionnement de ce monde. On veut collectivement reprendre le contrôle, on veut retrouver à la fois de la souveraineté au niveau régional, du contrôle de ça et du sens. Et donc, on ne peut plus avoir un agenda commercial qui soit contraire à notre agenda climatique. Il nous faut, dans nos échanges, être cohérents. Je ne suis plus favorable à ce qu'il y ait aujourd'hui un renforcement ou de nouvelles ouvertures de négociations commerciales avec des pays qui sont en contradiction avec l'accord de Paris. Je pense que ce serait une hypocrisie profonde de tous les débats qu'on est en train d'avoir aujourd'hui et les jours précédents. Et nous devons bâtir, au moins au niveau européen, puisque c'est à ce niveau-là, en tant que Français, je vous parle et qu'on a une action utile, un agenda commercial qui vise le zéro carbone et le zéro déforestation importée. C'est indispensable. C'est un changement profond, c'est une vraie révolution, et ça suppose de ne pas arrêter l'importation de certaines activités en totalité, mais de dire quand on importe et que telle activité peut avoir une conséquence négative en termes de déforestation, il faut que ce soit compensé et que ce soit intégré. Sinon, nous continuerons à avoir des beaux discours et un agenda commercial qui fait exactement le contraire. C'est un travail essentiel. Et puis enfin, sur le plan financier, il nous faut là aussi nous mettre en cohérence avec nos actions. Ce souci de cohérence, c'est d'arrêter de financer à l'extérieur des projets d'infrastructures carbonées. On ne peut pas dire ici, on est pour lutter contre justement le réchauffement climatique, pour la biodiversité et continuer à financer dans d'autres pays des infrastructures qui polluent, qui augmentent les émissions de CO2 et qui font exactement le contraire. Et donc, nous devons le faire nous-mêmes, chacun d'entre nous, dans nos agendas commerciaux et de financement. Et nous avons sur ce point franchi une étape dans le cadre de l'International Development Finance Club, où des engagements ont été pris et annoncés hier de financer 1 000 milliards de dollars pour le climat à horizon 2025. C'est un premier geste. Le but, c'est d'aller vers ces 4 trillions, donc on a encore ces 4 trilliards, donc on a encore du chemin, mais c'est un premier élément. On va accélérer les investissements dans les énergies renouvelables, la poursuite du retrait du charbon, favoriser l'accès direct des pays du Sud aux financements internationaux. Et on a beaucoup de pays ici présents qui s'engagent dans cet agenda qui est absolument essentiel et auquel nous tenons beaucoup. Dans un instant, le Premier ministre de la Jamaïque et l'émir du Qatar vont rendre compte de notre agenda et de notre mandat sur les 100 milliards qui doivent être mobilisés d'ici 2020, qui est absolument essentiel pour aider les pays en développement à rattraper et pour avoir un agenda de justice climatique et de justice sociale et de vrai développement. Et je veux dire un tout dernier mot pour conclure. La priorité immédiate est le fonds vert. La conférence de recapitalisation se tiendra à Paris dans un mois, le 24 et 25 octobre. Sa gouvernance a été réformée cet été pour plus d'efficacité et d'accessibilité. L'Allemagne, le Royaume-Uni, la France ont doublé leurs contributions. La France mettra 1,5 milliard d'euros dans le fonds, à 80% sous forme de dons. La Norvège a elle aussi doublé sa contribution. Hier, le Danemark, la Suède se sont joints aux pays qui doublent leur contribution. Les Pays-Bas l'ont augmenté. Nous sommes, au moment où je vous parle, à 7 milliards de dollars. La cible est d'atteindre 10 milliards de dollars pour aussi compenser le retrait américain.
To also make up for America's withdrawal. So maybe there might be some good news from the United States. I hope that that will come during this General Assembly. But I'm calling for each of you who have not yet done so. I'm calling.
J'appelle chacun d'entre vous, pour qui ne l'a pas fait, à rehausser sa contribution au Fonds vert. Je sais que nos amis japonais attendent beaucoup de cela aussi. Il faut qu'ils fassent leurs annonces. Je sais que l'émir du Qatar a des grandes nouvelles à faire. Donc je compte chacun sur vous. Des actes, des actes, des actes. On ne peut pas laisser notre jeunesse passer tous ces vendredis à manifester. On ne peut pas voir notre jeunesse dans l'état de souffrance, parfois d'émotion qu'on a vu tout à l'heure, et simplement dire on fait tout bien. On est encore loin du compte, mais continuons à agir ensemble.
There's still work to do, but let's do it together. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. Merci. Your Highness, Emir of Qatar, the floor is yours. We want to hear your views on how to advance climate finance.
فخامة الرئيس إيمانويل ماكرون، معالي رئيس الوزراء أندرو هولمز، السيدات والسادة، يسرني في البداية أن أتوجه بالشكر لسعادة الأمين العام للأمم المتحدة أنطونيو غوتيريش على جهوده المقدرة في الإعداد والتنظيم لهذه القمة الهامة. لا شك أن ظاهرة تغير المناخ هي إحدى التحديات الخطيرة في عصرنا، وهي مشكلة متفاقمة باستمرار.
It is a
وتطرح إشكاليات عديدة تتشابك في أبعادها الاقتصادية والبيئية والاجتماعية، ولها تداعيات سلبية بالغة الخطورة على كافة أشكال الحياة، بما فيها الحياة البشرية وعلى البلدان المتقدمة والبلدان النامية على حد سواء، ولا سيما على مسارات التنمية المستدامة التي تنشدها كافة الشعوب. تفرض هذه الظاهرة الخطيرة على المجتمع الدولي التعاون ومضاعفة الجهود لمواجهتها والحد من تداعياتها، ويكفينا النظر إلى الدمار الذي ألحقه إعصار دوريان بجزر البهاماس ومعاناة سكانها لتبين الحاجة الماسة إلى هذا التعاون. كما يتعين على جميع الدول الوفاء بمسؤولياتها وتنفيذ التزاماتها التي كرستها الاتفاقيات الدولية في هذا الشأن. حضور الكرام، لقد اطلعت دولة قطر بمسؤوليتها كشريك فاعل في المجتمع الدولي لمواجهة ظاهرة التغير المناخي. ففي عام 2012 استضافت الدورة الثامنة عشر لمؤتمر الدول الأطراف في اتفاقية الأمم المتحدة الإطارية حول تغير المناخ، كما استضافت منتدى الدوحة للكربون والطاقة الذي شارك فيه خبراء دوليين لوضع توصيات في مجال السياسات العامة لذلك القطاع والحكومات بشأن تغير المناخ والطاقة البديلة وجمع الكربون وتخزينه، كما أن دولة قطر لم تدخر جهدا في إنجاح مفاوضات اتفاق باريس للمناخ عام 2015. وعلى المستوى الوطني فإن دولة قطر في ضوء رؤيتها الوطنية 2030 اتخذت العديد من الإجراءات لتطوير التقنيات المراعية لتغير المناخ وتبني الطاقة النظيفة والاستخدام الأمثل للمياه من أجل التقليل من فقدان المياه المحلات والتشجيع على إعادة تدوير المياه وإعادة استخدامها وتحسين جودة الهواء وتعزيز كافة استخدام الغاز والطاقة وإعادة تدوير المخلفات وزيادة المساحات الخضراء. وفي السياق ذاته وتحقيقا لأهدافنا البيئية طويلة الأجل وضعت دولة قطر مجموعة متكاملة من الأهداف الثابتة أهمها تلك المتعلقة بالطاقة المتجددة لتوليد 200 ميجاوات من الطاقة الشمسية خلال العامين القادمين تزيد إلى 500 ميجاوات بعد ذلك. كما نسعى لتنظيم تسعير الكربون كوسيلة لخفض الانبعاثات ودفع الاستثمار اتجاه خيارات أنظف. وإننا بصفتنا دولة مستضيفة لبطولة كأس العالم لكرة القدم عام 2022 ملتزمون بتنظيم بطولة صديقة للبيئة أول بطولة محايدة الكربون عبر استخدام
through the use of solar-powered stadiums and cooling and lighting technologies that are water and energy efficient. I would also like to point out that the Qatar Sovereign Wealth Fund plays an active role in combating climate change through the Qatar Investment Authority, a founding member of the One Planet Global Sovereign Wealth Fund, which was established in accordance with the initiative of His Excellency President Macron to promote green investment and accelerate efforts to take into account climate change issues in the investment sector and in the management of sovereign wealth funds. The Qatar Sovereign Wealth Fund will promote and encourage green investment activities and will adopt low-carbon economic growth, which would help realize the climate goals of the Paris Agreement and would support the SDGs and allocate investment to sustainable natural resources. Ladies and gentlemen, as Qatar seeks to play its role as an active partner within the international community, I announce that the State of Qatar will contribute an amount of $100 million for the support of small island developing states. And least developed states to deal with climate change, natural hazards, environmental challenges, and to build their capacity to counter their destructive effects. In closing, I wish the summit all success, and I hope that we will achieve our goals for the good of humanity. Thank you. May the peace and mercy of God be with you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Prime Minister Holness of Jamaica. Clearly, the islands are on the forefront of the feelings of the effects of climate change. Your voice needs to be heard in this room. The floor is yours.
Colleagues, friends, the global financing system requires immediate transformation to support action to tackle climate change. For the past year, Jamaica has been co-leading efforts to make this happen. The transformation must be science-based, technically appropriate, transparent, and supported by accurate and inclusive tracking methodologies. Here are some of the things that we have been looking at and advocating. The Paris Agreement, Capital Transition Agreement, risk scenario analysis tools already applied by 600 financial institutions worldwide could be adopted by private institutions and private investors to align their portfolios with the Paris Agreement. The Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures should be used to better inform investors on climate-related risks. We were very happy to see yesterday the principles of responsible banking adopted by over 130 banks from over 45 countries, representing more than $47 trillion in assets. In addition, 42 major central banks and supervisory authorities have come together under the Network for Greening the Financial System. We encourage increased global participation in this valuable framework. We applaud the private sector-led Coalition for Climate Resilient Investment, which seeks to address pricing and redistribution climate risk. Jamaica looks forward to being one of the first countries to pilot this initiative. On the public sector side, the Coalition of Finance Ministers for Climate Action is actively promoting the incorporation of climate change reality into macroeconomic planning and public financial management. Jamaica has joined this coalition of expert practitioners, and for example, we will be making greater use of risk transfer instruments to mitigate against financial risks of natural disasters. Jamaica's effort to achieve fiscal discipline have not been without sacrifice. It is essential, therefore, that we have access to innovative, low-cost, and flexible financing windows to protect our hard-earned economic stability. We therefore welcome the commitment by multilateral development banks to further mobilize $40 billion of climate change investments from private sector investors annually by 2025. This includes important provision of technical assistance, use of guarantees, and other de-risking instruments. We also welcome their announcement of doubling adaptation financing to US $18 billion annually by 2025. We are encouraged by the pledges made yesterday at a luncheon Jamaica co-hosted with Norway for the replenishment of the GCF, and where we urged more developed countries to also double their contributions. I close by reiterating the concern of developing countries that the delivery mechanisms for climate finance are still fragmented and slow. The bottlenecks and gaps in the project investment value chain prevent climate finance from getting to where it is most needed. We are encouraged, however, by new and exciting developments, such as the Closing the Investment Gap Initiative and the Climate Investment Platform, which hold great promise and will expand to meet the investment and technical assistance needs of more developing countries. Colleagues, there is no silver bullet for climate finance challenges. However, by supporting and promoting existing and new initiatives, we will be taking action that the younger generation is demanding. Remember, they are watching.
Thank you, Excellency, and thank you to all of our presenters. The next panel is brought to you by the Secretary General, who has asked all countries, as you know, to stop authorizing new coal power plants by 2020. A shift from coal to renewable energy is not only possible, but also necessary, in his view, from the social and economic perspectives. We will now hear from leaders that are embarking on this shift. I invite now Her Excellency Zuzana Čaputová, President of the Slovak Republic, Ms. Jane Burston, Executive Director of the Clean Air Fund, Mr. Henrik Poulsen, CEO of Ørsted, and Mr. Jose Ignacio Sanchez Gallin, CEO of Iberdrola, all to take the stage. And again, in the interests of time, we ask that each participant limit their remarks to 3 minutes. President Chaputova, let's begin with you. Your country has a decarbonization strategy and a coal phase-out date that's very ambitious. Tell us, why did your country decide to fast-track that transition?
Thank you. Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we are living in the best time in history, enjoying enormous progress, but we forgot to pay the bill. We are in debt to this planet. We are the first generation that feels the impact of our reckless actions. And we may be the last one that can do something about it. To name just one thing that worries me the most, then it is the denial that the climate crisis exists or is in no way serious. To address the climate crisis while living in this denial will to lead our failure. We need to globally define new rules and their enforcement. We need rapid and profound change of policy in how we do business, produce power, manage transport, make investments, protect biodiversity, and manage natural resources to change our lifestyle. Let me be concrete. In Slovakia, we made a politically unthinkable decision to close our coal mines. It will need a serious transformation of part of our country to give people new jobs, open new businesses, and create new opportunities. We already produce 80% of our energy low on carbon. We are on the way to increase emission reduction from 40 to 45% by 2030. We committed to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. Just a few days ago, we made a decision to allocate additional €2.5 billion for climate investment by 2030. Internationally, we contribute to the Green Climate Fund. We support the plan of the European Union to make Europe the first carbon-neutral continent. Moreover, we are part of the climate initiative of Austrian President van der Bellen. No matter how small or big we are, we all can contribute without waiting for others to start. We must make sure that in the end, everybody can benefit from climate action. It will be successful only if it increases the well-being and dignity of all people, in particular those most vulnerable. Finally, I believe that if we succeed to unite on our climate action, we can generate a new sense of solidarity and common good. It can help restore international system, overcome divisions, and bring new opportunities in areas of peace and development. Because protecting our environment means being human. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. Ms. Burton, as Executive Director of the Clean Air Fund, tell us about the links between coal phase-out to clean air and people's health, and what can philanthropy do to contribute?
Thank you. Air pollution kills 7 million people every year, and many millions more suffer with chronic conditions that are caused or exacerbated by air pollution. I want you to imagine what that actually means for a second. I want you to imagine the schoolgirl gulping for air on the roadside because of an asthma attack brought on by air pollution. The families finding out that they're going to lose a parent to lung cancer. The baby whose lungs and brain will never fully develop because of air that his mother could not avoid breathing. This is a public health emergency, and it's getting worse. However, tackling air pollution offers us a really huge opportunity. An opportunity not just to save millions of lives, but at the same time to avert dangerous climate change and to strengthen our economies. The causes of climate change are very often the same as the causes of air pollution. Burning fossil fuels like coal is one of them. It contributes 2/3 of outdoor air pollution. The solutions, therefore, can also be the same. renewable energy, electric mobility, more walking and cycling, to name just a few. And in economic terms, the OECD and the World Bank calculate that tackling air pollution will actually save us money, trillions a year. And because almost everybody is affected, people will back the solutions and the leaders who implement them. Today, I'm pleased to announce the Clean Air Fund, a new philanthropic fund being set up to achieve clean air for all. We've raised $50 million in new commitments, halfway towards our target of $100 million. Our donors are the philanthropic foundations of the IKEA Foundation, Children's Investment Fund Foundation, Oak Foundation, Bernard Van Leer Foundation, the Guy's and St. Thomas's Charity, and the FIA Foundation. Thank you. And whilst that's a great start, that's a really great start, it is just a start. So I urge the leaders gathered here today to respond to the World Health Organization's call to action and to put tackling air pollution at the top of your agenda, because clean air is a human right, and together we can make it a human reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Burton. Mr. Poulsen of Ørsted, your company's abandoning fossil fuels in favor of renewables. What's the reasoning, if you could share with us, for this ambitious decision, and how has it impacted your business?
Yes, thank you, Secretary General and Your Excellencies. Let me tell you a brief story about the transformation of our company. Less than a decade ago, oil, coal and gas were at the very core of our business model. However, our company came under increasing financial pressure 7-8 years ago, and we basically had to start changing the business model. At the same time, we fully recognize that there is a profound need to start changing the energy system towards a greener and more sustainable one. Our old business model based on fossil fuels had to be replaced by a new model that was environmentally and also financially sustainable. Therefore, we made a wide-ranging decision to start shifting the entire business away from fossil fuels towards renewable energy. Since then, we have divested our oil and gas production, and we've reduced our coal consumption by more than 80%. From 2022 onwards, we will stop using coal altogether. Our CO2 emissions are down 83% compared to 2006, and by 2025, our production will essentially reach carbon neutrality. In isolation, these decisions reduced our short-term profits, but they were critical components in a broader transformation of our company and our commitment to help lead the way towards a more sustainable energy system. Parallel to moving out of fossil fuels, we have been investing $25 billion into renewable energy, and Ørsted is today one of the world's largest green energy companies. Our journey over the past decade hasn't been easy, but it has been necessary. We have in recent years delivered shareholder returns that are among the best in our industry, and Ørsted is today a global leader in offshore wind, a technology which over the past 10 years has developed from a niche to a rapidly growing global technology. Scaling up offshore wind has driven down the cost of the technology by more than 60% since 2014. It is now cheaper to build offshore wind farms than developing new coal or gas-fired power plants. The same, by the way, is true for onshore wind and solar energy. This is a major breakthrough for the green transformation. The renewable energy technologies that we need to fundamentally transform the energy system and radically reduce emissions are at our disposal, and they are cost efficient. The significant cost reductions in offshore wind demonstrate how governments setting clear and ambitious targets provide investment visibility for the private sector, which again drives innovation, cost reductions, and large-scale deployment. When governments around the world, assembled in this room, set ambitious targets and enact clear policies, the private sector can and will further accelerate the build-out of green energy. And this is urgently needed to speed up the retirement of old coal-fired power plants and to put an end to the construction of new coal-fired capacity. If we cannot get this done, the 2-degree scenario is out of reach, let alone the 1.5-degree scenario. And when needed, we must be ready to make near-term sacrifices to get it done. And as it was said earlier today, business as usual is indeed not going to be enough. We cannot tell our grandchildren that we failed to protect the planet because we were too focused on protecting our own well-being. We must act now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paulson. Mr. Sanchez-Galan, Iberdrola is a pioneer in changing its business model and increasing its share of business in clean energy while supporting that transition. Can you explain why you decided to steer that company in this direction?
Okay, thank you very much. So Iberdrola has been a traditional utility for more than 100 years, with a traditional standard mix as well, coal, oil, nuclear, hydro. But we started our energy transition 20 years ago, inspired by Kyoto Protocol. We invested in the period more than $100 billion in wind, solar, smart grid, and storage, in training our teams, and we had already closed all our oil and coal power plants in the period. Today, the results are here. We are now a much bigger company, much cleaner, more international, and a world leader in renewables worldwide. Our emissions per kilowatt hour in Europe are a fourth of those of our European peers, only 80 grams. And we plan to reduce it by half by 2030 and reach zero by 2050, thanks to the investment of more than 40 billion in the next 5 years. We have proven that the green economy generates industrial opportunities, more wealth, more and better jobs, and not only for us. We promoted local industries in depressed regions into more technology-intensive sectors. An example, for instance, is transforming shipyard into offshore wind. My message is that the energy transition to zero emissions is feasible because we already have technology able to supply the energy for a more electrified world at a very competitive cost. But the time is short. We now have to measure precisely who is doing what and how much is being done, and distinguishing between green energy and greenwashing. Each of us has a responsibility. We as companies investing in clean technologies, and governments in adopting faster procedures. Today, to build, for instance, a wind or solar farm takes 12 months, but administrative permitting can take 4, 5, or even more years. The NDCs have to address this. To conclude, it's now time for action. It's time for results and accelerate the execution of plans to reduce emissions. It's a moral obligation to live a better world and a healthier environment, in particular for the youth, and now we have the opportunity and the responsibility to do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gallen, and thank you to all of our presenters. I'd like to invite to the stage now His Excellency, Mr. Carlos Alvarado Quesada, President of Costa Rica.
Buenas tardes,
Secretario
Good
General,
afternoon.
Excelencias.
Secretary General,
Quisiera
Excellencies.
pedirles que
I would
imaginen lo
like
siguiente.
to ask you to imagine
Es
this.
posible que un país pueda sostener
It is
su
possible for
economía
a country to
con
support
electricidad
its economy
99%
with
renovable.
electricity
¿Sí
coming from
o no?
99% renewable
Es
sources.
posible que un
Is
país
it possible?
tropical
Yes or not? Oh,
que
no.
tuvo
Is it
el índice
possible
más alto
for
de
a tropical
deforestación
country
en
that
el
had the
mundo
highest rate
logre
of deforestation in the world in
detener
20
y
years
revertir ese proceso?
to revert that
o no?
process? Is it possible? Yes or no?
Es posible lograr crecimiento y
Is it
bienestar
possible
económico
to
al
achieve
mismo
growth
tiempo
and
que se
economic well-being
invierte
at the
en la
same
naturaleza?
time
¿Sí o
as
no?
we invest in nature? Yes or no?
Hoy yo quiero decirles
Today, what I want to tell
categóricamente
you,
que la respuesta es
categorically,
sí.
is that the answer
Sí
is
es
yes.
posible.
Yes, we
Porque
can
Costa
do it.
Rica,
Yes, it
siendo un
is
país
possible. Because
de renta
Costa
media,
Rica, as a
lo ha hecho.
middle-income country,
No hay
has been
excusa
able to
para
do
que países
this.
con más
There
recursos
is
y
no
más
excuse
posibilidades
for
no lo
countries
hagan.
with more resources
Vivimos
and
tiempos
possibilities
complejos.
to do the
Estamos en un
same.
punto de inflexión
These are
marcado por la
complex
ciencia
times.
que
We are
nos
at a
recalca
turning
que se
point
agota el
marked
tiempo
by
para
science,
solventar
pointing out
sí,
that time is
la
running
crisis
out to
climática
respond to
y
the
sus
climate
efectos sobre la
crisis
supervivencia
and
de
its
las
effects
especies.
on the survival
Hoy la
of
juventud nos
species.
reclama acciones
Today,
urgentes
young people
para
are
acelerar
calling
la
us to take
transformación
urgent
de
action
nuestras
to
economías
speed
hacia la
up the
descarbonización
transformation
y
of
para
our economies,
aminorar la
to
escala de la
decarbonize
afectación
them,
de
and
las
to reduce
poblaciones
the
más
scale
vulnerables.
to which
Señor Secretario
the
General,
most
usted nos
vulnerable
pidió venir a
populations
Nueva
are
York
affected.
con acciones
Mr.
y no
Secretary
con
General, you asked us
discursos.
to come with
Permítame
actions
entonces
to New York
que le
and not
comente
with
lo siguiente.
speeches. Let me tell
Primero,
you the following.
En febrero
First of
pasado,
all, last February,
Costa Rica lanzó el plan
Costa
de
Rica
descarbonización,
the
que es nuestra
decarbonization
estrategia
plan,
de largo plazo,
our
con una
long-term
meta
strategy
para llegar a ser
with a goal
emisiones cero netas
of
en
reaching
2050.
zero net emissions in
Para su
2050.
implementación, hemos tomado una
To
serie de
implement
acciones
this,
concretas
we have
que
taken
incluyen,
a
primero,
series of specific actions,
extender hasta el año
including
2050
first
una
extending
moratoria para mantener los combustibles
moratorium
fósiles
to
en el
keep
subsuelo
fossil
donde
fuels
pertenecen. No
underground where they
exploración,
belong.
no
where they belong.
explotación.
No exploration,
Creamos una
no
ley de
exploitation.
incentivos para la
We
movilidad
created a law
eléctrica, es decir,
to incentivize
quitamos los impuestos a
electric
los vehículos, al
power.
transporte eléctrico.
We removed taxes
Tercero,
from vehicles powered by
continuamos
electricity.
movilizando más de 30
Third,
millones de dólares
we are
anuales
mobilizing over
derivados
$30
de los
million a
impuestos a
year
los combustibles
derived
fósiles
from
y los
taxes
invertimos
on
en la
fossil
naturaleza,
fuels.
principalmente
And
en
we
los
are
bosques.
investing them
Cuarto,
mainly in nature,
en los últimos
especially
10 años el
forests.
país ha
Fourth,
invertido más
in
de
the past 10
5.000
years,
millones
Costa
de
Rica
dólares
invested more
en
than $5 billion
infraestructura para
in
garantizar
infrastructure
producción de
to
energía
guarantee
renovable, sea
renewable
hidroeléctrica,
energy
eólica
production,
o geotérmica.
hydroelectric,
En el último
wind,
año
or
hemos dotado de una
hydrothermal.
infraestructura de recarga todo el
We
territorio
have
nacional
provided
y la
the
flota
entire
vehicular
national
ha
territory
crecido en un
with recharging
500%,
stations.
pero la flota
And
vehicular
the
eléctrica.
electric-powered
Nos hemos
vehicle
comprometido
fleet
a
has grown by
alcanzar un
500%. We
60%
have
de
committed ourselves
cobertura
to achieving
forestal en el
60% of
año
forest
2030.
cover by
Hoy
2030.
tenemos un 52%.
Today we have 52%.
Y a que el 30% del
The
transporte
30%
público sea
and
cero emisiones
30% of
en el
public
año
transportation
2035.
has to be zero emissions
También,
by
Secretario General, hemos
2035.
comprometido
Also,
la
Mr.
construcción
Secretary
de
General,
2 trenes
we have committed to
eléctricos
build 2
alimentados por energía
electric
eléctrica limpia y
trains
renovable en una
fed
inversión
by
de
clean,
más de
renewable electrical
1.500
energy
millones
with
de
investment
dólares en
of over
conjunto.
$1.5 billion.
Aún así no es suficiente.
Still,
Tenemos
this
que
is
ir
not
por más.
enough. We have
Y por
to
eso
do
Costa
more.
Rica está
This is
comprometida
why Costa Rica
con
is committed
impulsar la ambición a
to
nivel global
pushing
y a través
forward
del
our
multilateralismo.
vision on a global
Por esa razón,
multilateral level.
trabajamos en diferentes plataformas,
We are working on
como el
different platforms,
NDC Partnership,
such as the NDC
en copresidencia con el
as
Reino de los Países
co-chairs
Bajos.
with the
Por eso
Kingdom of the
también
Netherlands.
seremos
And
los
also,
anfitriones
we
de la
will
pre-COP
host
25,
the
una pre-COP no
pre-COP
convencional
25, an
que se realizará en
unconventional
2 semanas en Costa Rica para seguir apoyando la campaña global por la naturaleza y promover la meta 30 por 30 con enfoques inclusivos de género y derechos humanos. Somos conscientes que las transformaciones producen incertidumbre incluso miedo, que podrían paralizar a algunos. Pero no debemos paralizarnos. Es posible un cambio transformacional con crecimiento económico y mejora de la calidad de vida. Avancemos juntos, pues, para alcanzar lo que parece hoy imposible. Si la casa está en llamas, el temor no debe paralizarnos, sino debe ser el motor de la acción para inspirarnos. Muchas gracias y pura vida.
Thank you very much and pura vida.
Thank you, Excellency. I would now like to invite to the stage His Excellency Mohammad Youssuf Kalla, Vice President of Indonesia.
Yang terhormat para kepala negara dan kepala pemerintahan, Bapak dan Ibu sekalian.
Ladies and gentlemen,
izinkanlah saya memulai dengan menyampaikan
allow me to begin by
kita
saying,
mendengar suaramu, Greta
we hear
Thunberg.
you, Greta Thunberg.
Dunia sebagai rumah bersama.
The
Rumah
world as
kita
our house
diambang kehancuran.
is falling apart.
Kita berada dalam keadaan darurat iklim.
We are in a climate
Cuaca
emergency.
ekstrim yang disebabkan oleh perubahan iklim
Extreme weather
telah
due to
membuat negara
climate
yang rawan
change
bencana menjadi lebih rentan.
have rendered disaster-prone countries even more
Indonesia
vulnerable.
sebagai contohnya.
Indonesia is a case
50
in point.
tahun yang lalu,
50 years ago,
hutan Indonesia 150 juta hektar
our forest
menjadi
vast,
paru-paru dunia bersama
150
Amazon.
million hectare,
Sekarang
becoming
sangat
the
berkurang
lung of the world
menjadi
with Amazon.
90 juta hektar
Now we only have 90
karena
million hectare
dieksploitasi untuk
due to
kebutuhan dunia
exploitation
masa
for
lalu.
the world's need in the past.
Kebakaran hutan, lahan dan gambut di berbagai wilayah Sumatera dan
Land
Kalimantan
and forest fires
justru
that
menjadi
have
semakin
broken
parah
out in
akibat
parts
dampak
of
perubahan
Sumatra
iklim.
and Kalimantan
Karena itu,
are worsened by the
mendesak
impact of
dibutuhkan
climate change.
action bersama
So we need to have
di dunia
common
ini
action
untuk menjaga paru-paru
to take
dunia
care
tersebut.
of the world's
Meski tidak
lung.
mudah,
Though it's not easy,
Indonesia telah mengambil langkah yang tegas dalam menangani
Indonesia has
tantangan besar
taken
ini.
serious measures to tackle this huge challenge.
Kita tidak lagi memiliki keleluasaan
We no
maupun
longer have
pilihan
the luxury,
selain
nor the
meningkatkan
option,
ambisi pengendalian perubahan iklim.
but to increase our
Dalam
adaptation
menghadapi
and
kenyataan
mitigation
ini,
for climate change ambition.
Aksi iklim harus konkret dan realistis.
To take concrete yet
Bapak dan
realistic
Ibu
climate
sekalian,
actions. Ladies and
Di
gentlemen,
Indonesia kami telah melakukan berbagai langkah
Indonesia has
untuk
taken
mengurangi
various
emisi gas
steps
rumah kaca
to curb greenhouse
dengan
gases
target
emission
ambisius sebesar 29% dengan
with
upaya
an
sendiri
ambitious target of 29% with own resources
hingga 41% dengan
and up
dukungan
to
internasional hingga
41%
tahun
with
2030.
international support by
Indonesia telah
2030.
meluncurkan Low Carbon Development Initiative
Indonesia has launched the
LCADI,
Low Carbon Development
sebuah
Initiative,
inisiatif yang berjalan seiring dengan keuntungan
an
ekonomi dan
initiative that
sosial.
goes hand in hand with economic and social
Indonesia juga telah
benefits.
mengintensifkan aksi iklimnya
Indonesia has also
melalui
intensified
solusi
its climate
berbasis
actions
alam
through
dengan
nature-based
merestorasi
solutions
2 juta hektar lahan
by
gambut
restoring
dan
2 million
merehabilitasi
hectares
12
of
juta
peat
hektar
lands
lahan
and
kritis pada tahun
rehabilitating 12 million
2020
hectares of degraded land by
dan
2030
melestarikan secara intensif daerah bakau dan daerah
and
pesisir.
rigorously conserving and restoring mangrove and
Transisi
coastal
energi
areas.
dengan menghapus subsidi bahan bakar fosil,
Energy transition
menetapkan
by
kebijakan
removing
biodiesel
fossil fuel
wajib dan
subsidies,
membangun kilang
stipulating a
bahan bakar
mandatory
hijau.
biodiesel policy, and
Indonesia akan
developing
membentuk
green
sebuah
fuel
fasilitas
refineries.
khusus pendanaan lingkungan
Indonesia
untuk
will
memfasilitasi
establish a
pendanaan
dedicated
iklim dan
environmental
mendukung
funding
program
facility
lingkungan lainnya.
to facilitate climate financing
Kami mengundang
and support other
mitra
environmental
internasional
programs.
untuk bergabung dalam BLU dana lingkungan.
We invite
Badan
international
Layanan Umum.
partners to join in our
Bapak
funding
dan Ibu
facility.
sekalian,
Ladies and
keberhasilan
gentlemen,
implementasi perjanjian Paris
The successful implementation of Paris Agreement lies not on individual but on collective efforts. On the energy transition, we urge the scaling up of funding support and technology transfers for affordable and accessible renewable energy. On sustainable oceans, we need to accelerate progress on ocean-based climate action.
Indonesia tidak dapat melakukannya sendiri.
Indonesia cannot do this alone.
Aksi iklim memerlukan aksi kolektif.
Climate action needs
Kita perlu
collective
secara
actions.
bersama-sama menciptakan planet yang sehat untuk masa depan manusia.
Together we need to build a healthy
Untuk masa
planet
depan yang
for
lebih
the
aman
future of
bagi
human
anak
race.
dan cucu kita.
Our
Terima
children
kasih.
and their children deserve a safe future. I thank you.
Sit down. Oh, golly. Thank you, Excellency. I would now like to invite to the stage His Excellency Wang Yi, State Counselor and Special Representative of President Xi Jinping from China.
Your Excellency, Secretary General Antonio Guterres, Your Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, ladies and gentlemen, China highly commends and supports the Secretary General's initiative for convening this summit. Climate change is a common challenge to all countries. To jointly tackle this challenge and protect the planet we all call home will be a journey critical to the future and destiny of mankind. In tackling climate change, we must first be determined to win the fight. We must honor our commitments, follow through on the Paris Agreement and its implementation guidelines, and see to it that both the summit and the COP25 will produce positive outcomes that will inject fresh impetus into the post-2020 multilateral process. The withdrawal of certain parties will not shake the collective will of the international community, nor will it possibly reverse the historical trend of international cooperation. Second, be prepared to take sustained actions. We must ensure that our climate actions are mutually reinforcing with our socio-economic endeavors, realize a transformation toward green and low-carbon development, and enhance climate resilience in the process of accelerating development. We must mobilize stakeholders and resources across all sectors to scale up pre-2020 actions to avoid shifting responsibilities to the post-2020 process. Third, be committed to cooperation. We must uphold multilateralism, especially the principles of common but differentiated responsibilities, respect the need for development and the special conditions of developing countries, and help them build preparedness. Developed countries, on their part, need to take the lead in reducing emissions and honor their commitment of mobilizing $100 billion a year in climate finance by 2020. Ladies and gentlemen, as a responsible member of the international community, China honors its words and keeps taking actions on climate change. Well, guided by a new development philosophy, China is pursuing high-quality growth and following a path of green, low-carbon and sustainable development. Last year, China's CO2 emissions per unit of GDP dropped by 45.8% from the 2005 level, overshooting the annual target. It is also a reduction of 5.26 billion tons of CO2 emissions. Also in 2018, its share of non-fossil fuel in primary energy consumption reached 14.2%, and the forest stock increased by 4.56 billion cubic meters from 2005. Since 2000, China has contributed to a quarter of the world's newly afforested land. Last year, China saw an increase of 1.25 million new energy vehicles, outnumbering many other countries in the world. China is also actively developing a national emissions trading market. China will faithfully fulfill our obligations under the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement and realize as scheduled its nationally determined contribution targets submitted to the UNFCCC Secretariat. We'll continue to jointly build a Green Belt and Road. Through the BRI International Green Development Coalition and other platforms, we are mobilizing stronger support for international cooperation against climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, co-leading the track of nature-based solutions, or NBS, China has been collaborating with many other countries and international organizations and have gained fruitful results in the following aspects. First, a deeper insight into the relations between man and nature. NBS advocates harmonious coexistence between man and nature and values ecological progress, thus fully leveraging the role of nature in enhancing the effectiveness of climate actions. Second, new measures for addressing climate change. We have proposed over 150 initiatives and set up a group of Friends for NBS mechanism to tap the mitigation potential of nature in order to cut CO2 emissions by 10 to 12 billion tons annually. Third, fresh support for the Sustainable Development Goals. We have compiled a list of over 30 case studies, including in forest carbon sink and biodiversity protection, to demonstrate how NBS can significantly promote coordinated economic, social, and environmental development, thus enabling better implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Ladies and gentlemen, long and difficult as the journey of tackling climate change may be, sustained actions will take us to the destination. By working together, we will build a clean and beautiful world where we will enjoy shared prosperity and a shared future. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Let me now invite to the floor Her Excellency Erna Solberg, Prime Minister of Norway, His Excellency Felix Chilombo Tshisekedi, President of the Democratic Republic of Congo, His Excellency Imran Khan, Prime Minister of Pakistan, His Excellency Jimmy Morales Cabrera, President of the Republic of Guatemala, and Mr. Faber, CEO of Danone. Once again, we remind speakers, in the interest of time, to remain within the 3 minutes allotted. In this next section, we will hear examples of immediate positive action from different regions throughout the world that show us what is being achieved through nature and how the private sector is advancing with the financial shifts that are required to ensure nature-based solutions are delivered at scale. We're going to begin this session with Prime Minister Khan. Your country is increasing emissions reduction through ecosystem restoration. What can you share with us on this item?
Well, 6 years ago, we discovered that Pakistan is one of the most vulnerable countries because of climate change and global warming. 80% of all the water in our rivers comes from our glaciers, which are in the Himalayas and in the Karakoram and in the Hindu Kush range. And we found that our glaciers were melting at a much faster pace. We discovered almost 5,000 glacial lakes because of global warming. So 6 years ago, we decided to plant 1 billion trees. And I'm very pleased to say that we actually planted 1.1 billion trees in the last 5 years. Now we have set ourselves a target of planting 10 billion trees in Pakistan in the next 5 years. And what we need from the world community is partnership, because clearly climate change is something which individual countries can't do anything unless and until the world gets together. Pakistan only contributes less than 1% to the greenhouse gas emissions. Yet we are number 7 country that is most vulnerable to global warming and climate change. So therefore, we are hoping that the world community contributes, joins in. My 2 fears, what I fear for the future: one, that obviously if the temperatures keep rising at the rate they are, we face catastrophe, because millions and millions of people depend on the water from our rivers. But my other worry is, and this is, I think, even more serious, that the world is not taking it as seriously as it should be. I fear that somehow some countries think that because climate change doesn't immediately affect them, they are not taking this as big as an issue it is going to be. Because eventually no country will be not affected by climate change. What we feel is that there will be climate refugees. Already in Pakistan, because of prolonged drought in Afghanistan, there have been refugees coming into Pakistan, climate refugees. But if the world does not take this seriously, I think the countries, richer countries, will be affected. So my appeal today, would be that powerful countries must chip in and take this seriously. Because unless the world community decides to take this challenge on, no individual countries are going to be effective. And human beings have this capacity that once they decide to fight a crisis, a challenge, they can surmount any challenges. But problem is, do they understand the gravity of the situation? And I hope by the time this conference ends, most of the world leaders do. Thank you.
Minister Khan, I understand you have to leave. Thank you for your efforts and thank you for your brevity. I appreciate it. We're going to move now to Prime Minister Solberg of Norway. Can you please share how Norway and others are enhancing climate commitments and promoting nature-based solutions to restore the ocean, reduce deforestation, and support the SDGs?
Well, Excellencies and delegates, we need to step up, to speed up, and to scale up. This is the message that the young people across the world have given us. It is reinforced by the images of devastating natural disasters, most recently from the Bahamas. And Norway is responding with increased ambition and action. We will strengthen our national determined contribution under the Paris Agreement, and we urge others to do the same. We will also submit a low-emission strategy to the UN. And I'm pleased to confirm that we will follow through on our Paris commitments to double the contributions to the Green Climate Fund. And in addition, we will continue to provide substantial support to countries that reduce deforestation. And allow me to say a few words also on behalf of the high-level panel of Sustainable Ocean Economy. The panel is comprised of 14 heads of states and governments across the globe. Together, we call on the world to step up ocean-based climate action. The oceans are severely affected by climate change. But today we released a study showing how the oceans can also provide solutions at scale. Ocean-based climate action can reduce the emission gap by up to 21% by 2050. A sustainable and healthy ocean economy will be crucial for fighting climate change. It will provide jobs and food security. It will help to protect biodiversity. We urge all of you to join us in accelerating the key ocean-based climate actions. This will help us to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement. And we will want to invest in nature-based climate solutions, scale up offshore and ocean-based renewables, rapidly decarbonize ocean industries, promote sustainable, resilient and low-carbon sources of food from the ocean, and advance the deployment of carbon capture and storage below the seabed, and scale up ocean observation and research. Coalitions of committed ocean industries are joining us in this work. So let's make COP25 a blue COP and use the UN Ocean Conference in Lisbon to secure real ocean solutions to climate change.
Thank you, Excellency. And now, President Chilombo Tshisekedi, can you please elaborate how the Central African Forest Initiative will help fight climate change, protect forests, and contribute to sustainable development in your region?
Bien, merci, Madame. C'est un honneur pour moi. D'autant plus que je représente la sous-région d'Afrique centrale qui a tenu à se mobiliser dans le cadre de ce sommet au travers la communauté économique des États de l'Afrique centrale, la CEEAC. Comme vous le savez, environ 30% des émissions mondiales de gaz à effet de serre sont séquestrées par les forêts et les tourbières. Nous savons tous que la nature offre des solutions très efficaces et durables et le plus souvent peu coûteuses à long terme. Fort heureusement, notre région abrite un des plus beaux et plus importants patrimoines mondiaux, les forêts du bassin du Congo, qui à cet égard constituent une part importante de la réponse à ces grands défis qui menacent notre belle planète. Ces magnifiques forêts sont malheureusement encore largement méconnues et trop peu valorisées par la communauté internationale. S'étendant sur 250 millions d'hectares avec un stock de 70 milliards de tonnes de carbone et absorbant environ 750 millions de tonnes de CO2 par an, les forêts du bassin du Congo jouent un rôle crucial dans la régulation du climat. La forêt du bassin du Congo permet de contrôler la pluviométrie jusqu'aux confins de l'Éthiopie et de l'Égypte. Cependant, de nombreux signaux indiquent que l'Afrique centrale pourrait devenir le prochain front de déforestation massive, répétant l'histoire des deux autres grands bassins forestiers de l'Afrique de l'Ouest. La disparition de cet écosystème provoquerait une crise écologique sans précédent. Elle déstabiliserait l'ensemble du continent africain du fait d'une gigantesque perte de biodiversité, d'une désertification de la sous-région et de la montée considérable des pressions migratoires. À cet égard, nous demeurons préoccupés et mobilisés par la situation du lac Tchad et ses lourdes conséquences socio-économiques. L'adaptation aux effets du changement climatique pour certains espaces de la région Afrique est intrinsèquement lié aux efforts entrepris pour les forêts. C'est pourquoi nous, chefs d'État de la sous-région, sommes hautement conscients que les actions que nous conduirons affecteront l'écosystème mondial. Sans être exhaustif et à titre illustratif, la République démocratique du Congo s'est engagée à stabiliser son couvert forestier à 63% du territoire et à réduire de 17% ses émissions de 2020 à 2030. Le Gabon et la République du Congo, couverts respectivement à 88 et 60%
have
de
coverage
forêts,
of 88 and
ont interdit la
60% of forest across
déforestation
their territories.
des
They
forêts
have
à haut
banned
stock de
the
carbone et haute
deforestation of
valeur de
high
conservation,
carbon stock
tout
forests
comme ils se sont
and also
engagés à
forests that are
respecter
valuable for
des seuils
conservation,
minimes
while
de
also
déforestation
respecting
de tout type de forêt.
keeping deforestation of
En
all kinds of
application du
forest to a
principe de
minimum.
zéro déforestation, les
Applying
pays
the
disposant
principle
des
of zero
zones
deforestation,
savanicoles, à l'instar de la
countries that
République du
have
Congo,
savanna lands
de la
like the
République
Republic of
démocratique du
Congo,
Congo
the
et du
Democratic
Gabon,
Republic of
ont
Congo and
décidé
Gabon have
d'orienter
decided
la production
to
agro-industrielle
take
hors
their
des zones
agro-industry
forestières.
production outside
Également,
of forest
les
zones.
deux Congos se sont
The
engagés
two
à
Congos have
préserver
also
et
committed to
gérer
preserving
durablement nos
and
zones de
providing
tourbières
sustainable management
qui
for our
représentent 30
peatlands,
milliards de
which
tonnes
represent around
de
30
carbone
billion tons of
et
carbon,
en évitant leur
by
assèchement
avoiding
et leur
drying out these lands
drainage.
or draining them.
Quant au Gabon,
For Gabon,
après avoir interdit l'exportation
Gabon
de bois brut et
prevented
rendu
the
obligatoire la
export of
certification
timber
de
and made
l'ensemble
the
des concessions
certification of all
forestières,
forest
il vient
concessions
de signer un accord
obligatory.
historique
It
avec
has
la
also signed a
Norvège
historic
à
agreement with
travers
Norway
l'initiative CAFI
through the CAFI
visant à
initiative
compenser les réductions
to
d'émissions d'un
compensate
montant de
for
150 millions de dollars
emissions
américains,
reductions of
valorisant pour la première fois
150
dans un
million
pays en
American
développement
dollars
la tonne de
by
dioxyde de carbone forestier
valuing
au double de son prix
a
habituel
ton
de
of
5 à
carbon
10 dollars.
dioxide at $10 rather
S'agissant
than
de la
5, so
République
doubling
démocratique
its
du Congo,
price. On the
j'entends
Democratic
accroître
Republic of the Congo,
significativement les aires
I
protégées,
intend to
y compris
increase
certains
the
cours d'eau,
protected area
sur l'ensemble
significantly,
du
including
territoire,
certain water
afin
courses across our territory
de
to
renforcer
strengthen
la préservation
preservation
de la
and
biodiversité.
preservation of
Mon
biodiversity.
pays s'est par ailleurs engagé
My country is also
à accélérer
committed
pour ces
to
populations
accelerating
l'accès universel
universal
à l'électricité
access to
afin de
electricity for
sortir
its
de la dépendance
population,
du bois
to end
qui
dependency on
représente plus de
wood,
90%
which
de
represents
l'énergie consommée
90%
par
of
les
the energy
ménages.
consumed by households.
Ce rêve peut devenir réalité.
This dream can
Nos
become
potentialités
reality.
hydroélectriques évaluées à ce jour à
Our
100 000
hydroelectric
mégawatts peuvent
potential
résoudre
comes to
les problèmes de la
100,000
population
megawatts, and this could
industrielle
resolve
en
a
besoins
lot of
énergétiques.
the
Mais au-delà
problems
de
in
la
terms of
République
energy
démocratique
needs.
du Congo,
But outside
le
the
site
Democratic Republic
Inga
of Congo, the
est
Inga
retenu
site
dans le cadre du
also
NEPAD
comes under the
comme
NEPAD
le
framework
moteur
as a driver for
d'industrialisation
the
de l'Afrique.
industrialization of Africa.
Répondant à l'appel du secrétaire
The
général des
Secretary
Nations
General has
Unies,
made a
les
call,
pays d'Afrique
and
centrale
in response, the
s'engagent
countries
ici
of Africa
à
have
actualiser
committed
leur
to
contribution
actualizing their
déterminée
nationally
au
determined
niveau national
contributions
pour
for
2020
2020,
avec comme priorité
and the priority
l'intégration
here
du
is the
secteur
integration
d'utilisation des
of
terres et
land
foresterie.
use and forestry.
Nous devons aussi
We
refléter
should
cela
also
dans les
reflect these
discussions avec les
considerations in our
institutions de
discussions
Bretton
with the
Woods,
Bretton Woods
car il est
institutions,
difficilement
because it is
concevable
hard to
que les
understand
forêts les mieux
how the
conservées au
best
monde
conserved
ne
forests in
captent
the
que
world
1% des
only
financements
receive
disponibles.
1% of the financing
Il nous faut
available.
faire plus
We have to
tous
do
ensemble.
more together,
Gouvernement,
government,
organisations
multilateral
multilatérales,
organizations,
ONG et surtout
NGOs,
le
and above
secteur
all, the
privé.
private sector.
Ce n'est qu'en nous mettant tous ensemble que nous
if we work
parviendrons
together,
à préserver
will
les
we be
forêts
able
du
to
bassin du
preserve the
Congo.
forests of the Congo
Il faut
Basin.
une solution
We
équitable,
need a
c'est-à-dire
balanced
prenant
solution,
en compte nos
taking
besoins de
into
développement
account our
et
development
nos efforts de
needs
préservation,
and our efforts
mais
for
également la
preservation,
valeur
but
de nos
also
services
the value of our
écosystémiques. Je vous
ecosystem
remercie.
services. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. President Morales, Central America is very much exposed to the worst effects of climate change. Can you elaborate, please, on the commitments your region has made on using nature to not only reduce emissions, but to enhance resilience?
Muchas gracias. Hoy es un día muy especial, no solo porque mi nieta cumple su primer año, sino porque tengo la oportunidad de poder compartir con ustedes el compromiso que tenemos los guatemaltecos con el cuidado de la naturaleza para la acción climática. Quiero agradecer al señor secretario por la invitación y a todos ustedes desearles el mejor de los días. Guatemala está convencida de la importancia de la naturaleza para la acción climática. Y por ello, la protección al medio ambiente y la gestión de los recursos naturales es uno de los 5 ejes prioritarios de nuestro plan de gobierno. Retomando la idea de los compromisos hechos en Abu Dhabi, el reciente mes de julio, cuando se habló de presentar hechos y no discursos, puedo exponer que hemos avanzado hacia la meta de restaurar y reforestar 1.2 millones de hectáreas de árboles de hoy al año 2032. Un trabajo trabajo en el que avanzamos notablemente y en el que desde que asumí mi mandato hemos invertido $200 millones a través del programa de incentivos forestales a nivel nacional.
We have invested
Ahora, a nivel regional, nos sumamos a la iniciativa de conservar los 5 grandes bosques de Mesoamérica, que son el segundo pulmón de América. En materia de protección ambiental, Guatemala ha trabajado fuertemente para la disminución de los niveles contaminantes del planeta. Y aunque solo generamos el 0.04% de polución mundial, somos uno de los 10 países más vulnerables a los efectos del cambio climático. Además, realizamos procesos sostenidos de información y formación de ciudadanos en temas de cuidado ambiental, reforestación y restauración, generando procesos educativos avalados académicamente por la Universidad de San Carlos de Guatemala, que a la fecha suman más de 65,000 personas capacitadas, principalmente mujeres.
Backed by the National University of Guatemala, and which has reached, until now, over 65,000 people, mainly women. We have made a lot of effort to clean water resources, increasing the number of wastewater treatment plants.
Y para ellos estamos instalando más de 200 biobardas en todo el territorio nacional. Tal vez ustedes se preguntarán, ¿qué son las biobardas? Estas son un sistema artesanal para la limpieza de cuerpos de agua fabricadas con desechos flotantes, con las que se ha logrado retener aproximadamente el 65% de los desechos sólidos flotantes en los ríos del país. Con esto, hemos evitado la contaminación de playas y mares del mundo. Estos sistemas artesanales, que también logran la cohesión comunitaria para la limpieza de ríos, se ha comenzado a instalar en otros países de América, como en Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Panamá, República Dominicana y recientemente en México. Hemos recibido solicitudes de compartir este invento artesanal con países de Asia-Pacífico, África y con países amigos de Sudamérica. Por cierto, estas biobardas han sido calificadas por el Fondo Económico Mundial como una invención ejemplar e inspiradora que contribuye a la conservación ambiental. Aprovecho esta oportunidad para compartirles que hemos iniciado el proceso de inscripción de las biobardas bajo las normas de la Organización Mundial de la Propiedad Intelectual a favor del Estado de Guatemala, y desde ya comparto este invento con todos ustedes y quedará a partir de hoy como un legado del Estado de Guatemala a la humanidad para la preservación de ríos, lagos y mares del mundo. En el marco de la protección integral de los recursos naturales, me complace también comentarles que se ha iniciado el proceso para prohibir la importación y distribución en todo el territorio nacional de bolsas plásticas de un solo uso, sorbetes plásticos y utensilios comunes de polietileno, para abrir la puerta a productos amigables con el ambiente. Desde el año 2016, Guatemala, conjuntamente con Taiwán, hemos llevado a cabo más de 100 proyectos que cubren gran variedad de sectores, dentro de los cuales la gran mayoría dan énfasis especialmente a ámbitos de los ODS. Taiwán, siendo socio fuerte de Guatemala, ha encaminado dichos proyectos acompañándole en su desarrollo y progreso, enfocando los ejes de cooperación en base a las principales prioridades de Guatemala y los ODS. En resumen, puedo decirles que Guatemala está plenamente comprometida con la importancia de la naturaleza en la acción climática. Dios los bendiga. Buenos días.
Thank you, Excellency. Mr. Faber, how are companies collaborating to enhance climate action through investing in sustainable food systems and supply chains?
Thank you. Good morning. Forgive me to cut it short, but the food system that we have built over the last century is a dead end for the future. In essence, we thought that our science could change the cycle of life and its rules. We thought we could engineer the life that we needed and kill the rest in the fields. The resulting monocropping consequences are standing right in front of us now.
I'm really being asked to...
We depend for 2/3 of our food on this planet on only 9 plants today. And 40% of our lands are already degraded. In a nutshell, we have broken the cycle of life. And the missing link is the biodiversity in our fields. So today we are launching the One Planet Business for Biodiversity, which is a coalition of, to start with, 20 of the largest food and other agri-based companies in the world that commit to put nature-based solutions at the heart of our strategies, our processes, our supplies. We are going to focus on 3 priorities on which we will come back to you when Kunming Conference of Parties will happen next year. The first is that we will shift our practices towards regenerative agriculture to restore soil health, to create a future for our farmers. The second, using the thousands of brands we have in our portfolio, we will create a demand for a variety of crops, of species, of traditional seeds that are forgotten today and that are dying. And the third is we will answer the need for an urgent change in the way we address deforestation and we protect wildlife and wild biodiversity. The total sales of this coalition today is about $500 billion, 100 countries where we operate. It looks big, but it's not. It's only a start. We need many more partners, and in particular, we need your support. That's why I'm here today. We need your support to shift agricultural subsidies from killing life into supporting biodiversity. We need your support to make sure that we can find a pricing mechanism for the incredible, invaluable externalities that nature is providing us all and farmers every day in the world. And finally, we need your help to curb finance and make sure that finally they support this agenda. I know it's not going to be easy. When it comes to nature and climate, it takes leadership and courageous leadership. I would really like to beg you to listen to our youth. They are demanding this regenerative culture in the streets and beyond. I would like to invite you also to listen to this inner voice in each of us that whispers that life is sacred. This is where we find our energy every day, in the fields, in the factories, on the markets, to turn this huge tide, because we've been killing life and we now need to restore it day by day, one by one. So with your support, we'll report back in 1 year from now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all our presenters. Thank you, Mr. Thank you. Thank you so much. I would now like to invite to the stage Her Excellency Katrina Jakobsdottir, Prime Minister of Iceland. And again, in the interests of time, I implore all speakers to keep their remarks within 3 minutes. We are running quite a bit behind. Thank you, Prime Minister.
Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Urgency is the key theme in this Climate Action Summit, and make no mistake about it, we are really facing a planetary emergency. We need to act now to save the future. If we do not start to decrease global emissions now, we may reach a point of no return, with ice caps melting, coral reefs becoming extinct, rainforests dying. It is not an exaggeration to say that this catastrophic climate change is a threat to civilization and humanity. And this can cause fear, but fear alone does not always inspire good decisions. Most of all, we need hope. The threat is real, but so are the solutions. Is averting disaster hard work? Yes. Will it cost? Yes. But smart policies can keep the cost of climate action low and bring many benefits to society and economy. Iceland's electricity and heating now comes 100% from renewables. Was this hard work? Yes. Did it cost? Of course. But clean energy transformation was perhaps our best investments in terms of both the economy and the quality of life. And I am convinced that the investment we are making now in implementing an energy shift in our transport system is going to be vital to fight the climate crisis, but also going to be a very good investment for our society and our economy. In Iceland, we have lost 95% of our woodlands since settlement and half of the fragile volcanic soil. And we are now reversing this. Our island is getting greener. This year, the government launched new projects to heal the land and soak up carbon from the atmosphere. At the same time, we are using innovation to pump carbon dioxide underground, transforming carbon dioxide into solid minerals in basaltic rock. The solutions are at hand to reach carbon neutrality, and Iceland has declared its goal of becoming carbon neutral in 2040. Globally, we need to do more to protect carbon sinks, plant trees, and reverse desertification. We need a price on carbon, an end to dirty subsidies, greener lifestyles, and clean investments. We need a stronger green climate fund, and that's why the Icelandic government has decided to double our contribution to the fund. Ladies and gentlemen, last night I participated in a goodbye ceremony for a known glacier in Iceland called Ok, that is no more and the first of many glaciers to follow. The message of the vanishing ice is one of urgency, but not despair. We humans can reach the moon if we want to. We can save the Earth if we really want to. We will need hope. We will need cooperation, green technologies, and relentless persistence in breaking the old, dirty habits that die hard and advance clean solutions. We all need to do more and better. This is what science tells us, and the message of the young generation is very clear. We have no excuses not to act now. We are here in New York to pledge to do more and better. Let this summit be a summit of actions, actions that speak louder than words. Let us embrace hope, and let us ensure that all our actions against the climate crisis will also result in climate justice. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Excellency. I'd now like to welcome to the stage Her Excellency Mette Frederiksen, Prime Minister of Denmark. Prime Minister, you've recently formed a government with very ambitious climate targets, and you're also co-leading the strategy on energy transition coalition here at the summit. Could you let us know your plan as Prime Minister and how you can go even greener?
Thank you so much. Every generation will face a defining challenge of their own, a possibility for us to change the world. Only a few generations have proven brave enough to actually do so. Today, climate change is our defining challenge, and future generations depend on us. The UN Secretary General calls for all of us to take the leadership, to take more action, and to do it faster. Denmark is ready to do both. And together with our coalition partners in the energy transition track, we have come up with concrete ideas. Many are being presented on stage today. I want to thank Ethiopia as a co-lead and C4All for an excellent cooperation on the energy transition. A work of critical importance, if you ask me, because energy accounts for 80% of CO2 emissions. Clean and smarter energy can provide 90% of the reductions needed by 2050, 90%. And transition is possible. When America, this great country, put a man on the moon, almost all of Denmark's energy production was based on fossil fuels. Today, it is less than half. We have proved in Denmark that clean energy can go hand in hand with progress. And now we have decided to raise the bar even further. Last year, a unified Danish parliament set out to reach climate neutrality with a net zero emissions by 2050 at the latest. And this year, my newly formed government set the target even higher, a reduction in 70%. 70%, imagine. Will that even be possible? Dear friends, if it wasn't difficult, it wouldn't be ambitious enough. We will push for changes where it needs it most urgent: agriculture, transport, buildings, fashion, and much more. We are going to redouble our efforts when it comes to raise more forest in Denmark. And just last week, we decided to double up the earmarked funds for green research and innovation. And even then, it will be hard for us to reach 70%, especially because we need a just and fair transition without inequality raising. We stand ready to share our experiences and take further international leadership. Therefore, today, Denmark is offering to continue to take the lead when it comes to fulfilling SDG number 7. No country, no company, no organization can handle this alone. I think we have to admit that future generations rely on us to act, and Denmark is, of course, ready to take some of the leadership. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency. I'd now like to invite to the stage His Excellency Iván Duque Márquez, President of Colombia.
Excellencias, apreciados
Excellencies, delegates,
el mundo está sufriendo
the world is
las consecuencias
suffering from the
del cambio
consequences
climático.
of climate change.
Estamos viendo cómo se
We are seeing
destruyen
how
nevados, glaciales,
glaciers
cómo
are
aumenta
being
la erosión
destroyed,
costera,
how coastal erosion
cómo
is
se
increasing,
afectan muchas
how
comunidades,
many communities are being affected,
cómo van aumentando
how
los niveles
we've seen a
del
rise
mar
in sea
y
levels,
también
and also
cómo se acentúan
how
muchos desastres
many
naturales.
natural disasters are getting worse.
Esta situación
This situation
demanda de nosotros
requires from us
que actuemos con determinación,
that we act
con
with
sentido de
determination,
urgencia,
with a sense of urgency,
que entendamos que este es el más
and
grande
that we
reto
understand that this is the
de
greatest
nuestro
challenge
tiempo,
of our time,
el reto que más
the
requiere
challenge
la
that
acción de todos.
requires action from
país,
everyone.
Colombia,
My country, Colombia,
representa tan
represents
solo el
only
0.4% de todas las emisiones
the
globales de
entire
gases
global
efecto
emissions
invernadero.
of greenhouse gases.
Tenemos
We
la sexta
have
matriz
the
energética más
sixth
limpia del mundo.
cleanest energy matrix in the world.
Tenemos el 50% de los páramos del planeta
50%
y
of
más del
the places
40% de
in the
nuestro
planet, and
territorio
more than 40% of our
puede
territory
considerarse
can be considered
selva tropical húmeda, mucha de ella
a
ubicada en nuestra
tropical
Amazonía.
rainforest, most of it located
Pero
in
digo
the
todo
Amazon.
esto
But I'm saying all of this
porque a pesar de
because
representar
despite the fact
tan bajos
that
niveles
we represent
de
we have
emisiones de
such
gases
low
efecto
levels
invernadero,
of greenhouse gas
Colombia
emissions,
es uno de los países
Colombia
más
is one of the
vulnerables
countries
a
that is
los
most
efectos del
vulnerable to the
cambio
effects of
climático.
climate change.
Y todos,
And all of us,
empezando por nosotros,
starting with us,
tenemos que actuar
we
y
have to
actuar de
take
manera
action
decidida y
and
coordinada.
act decisively and
Frente al
in
cambio
a coordinated
climático,
fashion.
El mensaje
In
que
the light
yo
of
quiero
climate change, the
transmitir
message that I
es
would
que
like to convey
todos
to you
debemos
is that
reflexionar
we must all
globalmente,
think
pero
globally,
tener la
but
capacidad de
have the
actuar
ability to
localmente.
act locally.
Y por eso tenemos que
And that
hablar
is
de
why we
acciones
have to speak about
concretas.
specific actions.
Apenas llevamos un año y un mes de gobierno.
We've been in
Pero
government for
tenemos
only a year and
claro
a
que
half,
es
But we understand that it's this government, the government of a new generation, that has to take the leadership and take action, which would make it possible to provide an example and motivate Colombian society. And the first action which I'd like to share with you has to do with the energy transition that is taking place in Colombia. A year ago, when our government took office, we had barely 0.1% of our energy matrix in renewable and unconventional energies, such as solar and wind energy. In a year, we've tripled that, and our goal is to reach 10% in 2022 and 20% in 2030. The steps that we take from now to 2022 will be from less than 50 megawatts to more than 1,050 megawatts. And I'm pleased as well with the fact that we've also participated with several countries at the global level. Now 8 countries, including Chile,
Honduras,
Peru,
Costa Rica, El
Honduras,
Salvador,
Costa Rica, Salvador,
Ecuador, Guatemala, República
Ecuador,
Dominicana
Guatemala, the
y
Dominican Republic,
Haití.
and
Y
Haiti.
nuestra meta es que para el año 2030 el 70% de las fuentes de energía
the energy
sean
sources
energías
will be
renovables para
renewable
que mostremos
energies,
el
so that we
compromiso de
can
toda
show
una región
the commitment
frente
of
a
an
estos
entire region
desafíos.
in the light of these challenges.
Hemos hecho la transformación también del parque
Also
automotor.
transformed
Sacamos la ley de
our
movilidad
vehicle fleet.
eléctrica
We've
y hemos
passed the
brindado además
Electrical
incentivos
Mobility Act, and
tributarios
we've also provided
para que
tax
tengamos un
incentives
transporte
so
más
that we
limpio.
can have cleaner
Y
transportation.
hemos también fijado un
We have also
compromiso con el
set
sector
a commitment
privado,
with the private sector,
a todas las empresas
all
que inviertan en
corporations that invest
energías
in
renovables
renewable
y en
energies
eficiencia energética,
and in energy efficiency.
les permitiremos
We will
descontar
allow
el
them to
50%
discount
de sus
the
inversiones
50% of their
del
investment
impuesto corporativo de
from
renta,
the
para que
corporate
se
income tax,
entienda
so
también que hay una
that
motivación
we can
hacia todos los
understand that this
sectores.
is a motivation for
Hemos
all
logrado en
sectors.
un año
And
tener
in a year, we've
en esa
managed to
transición
obtain in
energética
that energy
el menor
transition
número de material
the
particulado
lowest
en el
number
combustible,
of
pensando en la calidad del aire.
the
Y hemos
particles
avanzado
in air
también hacia el
pollution. And we've also
acceso
moved
de las
towards
comunidades más
access
vulnerables
for the
en
vulnerable,
un
most
país
vulnerable
donde casi 1
communities in
millón
a
de
country
personas
where
no
almost 1 million
tenían luz
people
eléctrica.
don't have
En un año ya
electricity.
son más de
In a year,
16,000
there
familias
are more than
que están
16,000
recibiendo
families
energía por primera
which
vez
are
con
receiving
paneles solares
energy for the first
individuales
time with
en sus
individual solar
residencias.
panels in their
Y nuestra
homes.
meta
And
es que
our goal is
400,000
that
colombianos de aquí al
400,000
2022
Colombians by the
también
year
tengan esa
2022
solución
will
en
also
sus
have
hogares.
that solution
Nuestro
in their
compromiso,
homes. Our commitment,
delegados, excelencias,
delegates,
también es
excellencies,
luchar contra la
is also to
deforestación.
fight against deforestation.
Hemos convertido la
We have
protección de los
converted
recursos naturales
the
en un
protection of
asunto de
natural
seguridad
resources
nacional,
to a matter of national security,
enfrentando la minería ilegal,
tackling
los
illegal
cultivos
mining,
de uso ilícito, el
the,
desarrollo de maderables
cultivation of illicit
ilegalmente
crops,
y, por
and,
supuesto,
of course,
evitar que se haga
we,
una extensión de la
managed
frontera
to prevent
agrícola de
an
manera
extension
irresponsable.
of, agriculture
Todo
in
esto
an
ha llevado en
irresponsible
que
fashion.
tan solo un
So all
año
this has meant that in
hayamos
only a
reducido
year
la
we have
deforestación
reduced
cerca de un
deforestation by almost
17%
17%.
y seguimos
And we will
comprometidos.
continue
Y además
to be committed to this.
tenemos la
And
meta de
furthermore,
sembrar
we
180
aim
millones
to
de
plant
árboles para el
108
2022
million
para que
trees for
podamos
the year
proteger nuestra
2022
tierra
so that we can
común
protect
y lo
our
hagamos
common
involucrando
planet
también
and
a
we
las
can continue
comunidades.
to involve
Y me
communities.
complace,
And I'm pleased as
me
well.
complace decir con orgullo
I'm pleased to
que a
say with
comienzos
great
de
pride
este mes,
that at the beginning of this
con
month,
Brasil,
with Brazil,
con Perú, con
with
Ecuador,
Peru, with Ecuador,
con Bolivia,
with
con
Bolivia,
Guyana y con
with
Surinam,
Guyana,
con
and with
Brasil,
Surinam,
con
with
Colombia,
Brazil, with Colombia,
firmamos el
we
Pacto de
have signed
Leticia,
the
un
Leticia
pacto
Pact,
para proteger la
a pact to
Amazonía,
protect the
para que
Amazon,
tengamos
so that we can
indicadores,
have
para que tengamos la
indicators, so that we can
posibilidad
have
de
the possibility
compartir
of
gestión
sharing
y protección
management
y
and
prevención.
protection and
Y
prevention.
por esa vía, proteger
And
también
in
ese
that way,
importante
we can
patrimonio de la
protect as well
humanidad.
this important
Esas
legacy
medidas
of
y esas
humankind.
acciones
These actions,
son
these
las que a
measures
nosotros nos motivan todos
are
los días
what encourage us
y que
on a
también
daily
nos
basis.
llevan a que en un
And it
año
also has
podamos
meant that in
decir
a
que
year
tenemos una
we can say
agenda de
that we
ganadería
have
sostenible,
an agenda of
donde
sustainable
podemos reducir
cattle
la
bearing, where we
extensión,
can
fomentar la rotación,
reduce
tener más
extension,
productividad
increase
y
rotation,
utilizar
have more
de manera
productivity,
decidida el esquema
and
silvopastoril.
use
Y nuestra
the
meta
pastoral
es
schemes more
llegar a
effectively. And our
100,000
goal
hectáreas
is to
silvopastoriles para mostrar que también se puede hacer transformación en la producción y que se puede hacer además en armonía con la captura and we can also do this in harmony with the reduction of greenhouse gases. We have, in a year, we have obtained the first regional circular economy policy. And today we can participate in this coalition with the tropical forests so that we can all understand that this is something that involves all of us. Dear delegates,
nuestra meta es llegar al 2050 con esta gran coalición que nos permita a nosotros ser carbono neutral. Y estamos motivados con invitar a todos los grupos ancestrales e indígenas a que participen de nuestras estrategias recibiendo pagos por servicios ambientales. Esto que les narro es apenas el inicio de un gobierno que quiere hacer una gran transformación y sembrar una ética del siglo XXI que oriente la sociedad a que todos tenemos algo que aportar para enfrentar los estragos del cambio climático. Hace unos días veíamos a los jóvenes del mundo reclamando acciones nuestras. Ya llegó el momento de pasar de los discursos a las acciones. Ya llegó el momento de pasar de los escritorios a los territorios. Este es el tema más importante de nuestro tiempo y todos aquí tenemos que mostrar nuestra firmeza para enfrentarlo y dejarle un mejor patrimonio y una mejor casa común a nuestros hijos. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency. The next presenters from member states and the private sector will highlight actions that will lead to climate-resilient futures. I invite now His Excellency Josiah Vorenke Bainimarama, Prime Minister of Fiji, His Excellency Muhammadu Buhari, President of Nigeria, His Excellency Mark Rutte, Prime Minister of the Netherlands, Mr. Mark Carney, Governor of the Bank of England, and Mr. John Haley, CEO of Willis Towers Watson, to come to the stage.
And as you're preparing, I remind you once again that we are running quite a bit behind, and in the interests of time, we implore you to try to keep within the 3 minutes allotted to each speaker. Are the translation devices? As we wait for the translation devices to come out on stage, just another quick reminder, we are running quite a bit behind. Trust me, I don't want to cut anybody off, and yet I'm being asked to. So if you see me, oh, all English, okay. Here we go. We're going to start with the Prime Minister, Bainimarama. As a vulnerable Pacific island nation of Fiji, and as a consistent climate champion, we would be grateful if you could outline Fiji's efforts to transition to the resilient future that we're discussing today.
Thank you. On behalf of Fiji, I rise to answer the call of the Secretary General for more ambition and more action to wrestle our planet from the grasp of the climate crisis. Fiji stands committed to uniting behind the science, an impatient plea that the world's youth just demanded from each of us. The brutality of our changing climate has already driven vulnerable communities into a nightmare scenario, one in which the hellscape of storms like Cyclone Winston and Hurricane Dorian have become the new normal. Even if we limit temperature rise to the 1.5-degree target without urgent adaptation, our suffering will go for generations and claim many more innocent lives. Acceptance of this living nightmare is morally unthinkable, and denial is unconscionable. Every nation must heed the call of our youth to wake up and begin building towards a vibrant, resilient future. Fiji's view of what must be done is clear. We have submitted our long-term strategy to achieve net zero emissions before 2050. We are nearing completion of our enhanced NDC. We enacted an environmental and climate levy, issued a green bond, and are using innovative financing solutions to fund these plans. We are relocating climate-vulnerable communities and infrastructure. We are striving to achieve 100% renewable energy by 2030. And we are finding creative ways to reduce emissions from our biggest emitter, transportation, including public transport and shipping. We are promoting climate-resilient agriculture and are finding nature-based solutions to protect our forests, our mangroves, and riverbanks. We are enshrining our commitment to the Paris Agreement through a new climate change law, which is currently undergoing public consultations. We are ensuring that our oceans are an integral part of both the UNFCCC process and our own national development, pursuing 100% sustainable management of our economic exclusive zones by 2030. We have declared a 10-year moratorium on seabed mining, and I have asked others to join us to allow for research and properly assess the environmental hazards. Why, as a tiny carbon emitter ourselves, are we taking such drastic action? The answer is simple. While Fiji did not cause the climate crisis, we are fully awake to its reality. Someone must act with clear-eyed purpose and resolve. Someone must clear a path for others to follow. If we fail or if we falter, our children and grandchildren will have no path at all. Thank you, Secretary General, for this opportunity to speak at this summit and for your understanding, foresight, and unrelenting passion. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. President Buhari, Nigeria has a very young population. Perhaps you might highlight what a pathway for a resilient future looks like.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I share the sentiment expressed by the Secretary General that the world is on the verge of climate catastrophe. Undeniably, climate change is a human-induced phenomenon. It is now imperative that we must step up our collective climate actions in line with the request of the Secretary General. It is in this regard that I wish to reiterate Nigeria's commitment to its obligation under the Paris Agreement, the aspirations enshrined in our national determined contribution, and the ensure a resilient future that mainstream climate risks is our decision-making. I want to announce that the government of Nigeria will develop a more robust sectorial action plan and expand the scope of our sovereign green bonds in line with our intended upward review of Nigeria's NDCs towards the inclusion of the water and waste section by 2020. We will take concrete steps to harness climate innovative ideas by including youth in decision-making processes as part of our overall climate governance architecture. We will mobilize Nigerian youth towards planting 25 million trees to enhance Nigeria's carbon sink. In the energy sector, Nigeria is presently diversifying its energy sources from dependence on gas-powered system to hydro, solar, wind, biomass, and nuclear sources. Specifically, Nigeria is progressively working to realize 30% energy efficiency and renewable energy mix by 2030. This is envisaged to lead to 179 million tons of carbon dioxide reduction per annum by 2030. I should also inform the summit that our government has introduced climate-smart agricultural practices to unlock 74 million tons of carbon dioxide per annum through relevant technologies, advocacy, and best practices. As you are aware, the Lake Chad Basin, which used to be a region of productivity, food security, and wealth for an estimated 40 million citizens living around the lake basin, has shrunk significantly from its original size due to climate change. We will continue to lead in efforts to have solid partnership for the ecological restoration and recharge of the Lake Chad. We are confident that this would improve the living conditions of diverse nationals living in the area, promote interstate cooperation, strengthen community resilience,
as well as assist in addressing the environmental and security crises that threaten the region, its resources, and inhabitants. I'm glad the Secretary General and some of the member states presented in this hall are partnering with us in this endeavor. We shall thank them for their cooperation, and I look forward to deepening our partnership. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency. The Netherlands are doing a lot on adaptation and resilience at home and abroad. Prime Minister Rutte, you have the floor.
Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We are gathered together to address the defining challenge of our age. Climate change is happening. The impact is real. The time to act is now. These are not my words, but those of former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon back in 2007. And to me, it shows that the time for words and political promises is over. We need ambitious climate goals and solid measures for achieving them. Without urgent climate action, the Sustainable Development Goals will remain out of reach. In the Netherlands, we are raising the bar. We are going to reduce domestic emissions by 49% by 2030 and 95% by 2050 compared to 1990. And at the EU level, we are even setting our sights on climate neutrality by 2050. To reach our goals, we have a set of measures that are both specific and broad. They include phasing out all coal-fired power plants by 2030, imposing a targeted carbon levy on industry, and stepping up our efforts in offshore wind. We have laid down these measures and more in a national climate agreement. An agreement we fleshed out with over 100 partners from all areas, ranging from trade unions and NGOs to major corporations and the financial sector, in keeping with the deep-rooted Dutch tradition of securing broad support from across society. We asked independent experts whether we will be able to achieve our goals in this way and whether the financial burden will be shared fairly between businesses and citizens. And they gave us the green light to go ahead. And this shows that it is possible to set ambitious and widely supported climate goals at a national level. But climate doesn't stop at our borders. So in Europe, the Netherlands is calling for climate neutrality by 2050. And I support Commission President-elect Ursula von der Leyen in her plans to raise the EU's reduction target for 2030, possibly to 55%. Worldwide, the Netherlands is spending over €1 billion on climate programs, half of which consists of publicly mobilized private capital. And with the NDC partnership, we provide support to developing countries to help them implement more ambitious climate policies. We also work with our financial sector to improve its climate impact. As a nation that's been fighting against water for many centuries, we are also looking forward to hosting the Climate Adaptation Summit in 2020. Chair, ladies and gentlemen, the Netherlands is working in all kinds of ways to ensure an ambitious policy nationally and internationally. Sharing experiences is an essential part of this. And we are keen to contribute to this exchange based on our experiences with our national climate agreement. Because we are very aware that although climate action begins at home, we are all in this together. Thank you.
Excellency, thank you. Mr. Carney of the Bank of England could speak to us about many issues related to the financial sector and climate change, but today he's here due to his leadership on mainstreaming resilience into the decision-making process. Mr. Carney, just how critical is this issue?
Thank you very much. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, a new sustainable financial system is being built. It's funding private sector initiative, it's funding resilience, and it has the potential to pull forward the impact and actually accelerate the effectiveness of your climate policies. But like virtually everything else in the response to climate change, it's not moving fast enough for the world to reach net zero. To bring climate issues to the heart of financial decision-making, climate disclosure must become comprehensive, climate risk management must be transformed, and sustainable investing must go mainstream. And here's how. First, on climate disclosure. The demand for the TCFD disclosures that the Prime Minister of Jamaica referenced is now enormous. Current supporters control balance sheets of over $120 trillion. All the major banks, major asset management firms, insurers, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds. The supply of that disclosure is now responding. Over 4/5 of the top 1,000 G20 countries are disclosing in line with the TCFD. But now these disclosures need to become mandatory, as the UK, Canada, and the EU have signaled. It's time for every country to get involved, because the world won't get to net zero if the financial sector doesn't know how our companies are responding. To watch, you need to be able to see. Secondly, on risk management, the providers of capital and those who supervise need to all improve vastly our ability to manage climate-related financial risks, because the changes in climate policies, the new technologies that will result, and the growing physical risks will prompt reassessments in the value of every single financial asset. And that's why the Bank of England is launching now the first stress test of a major financial system against different climate pathways, including the catastrophic business as usual and the ideal but still challenging transition to net zero. These initiatives, this initiative, will bring the management of climate risks to the heart of the global financial system. But just as with climate disclosure, now is the time for others to join and go global. Finally, on returns, for sustainable investment to truly go mainstream, it needs to do more than screen out incorrigibly brown investments or finance deep green innovation. It must also catalyze and support the transition of all companies from brown to green. And at present, one of the biggest hurdles is the inconsistent measurement of this dynamic, so-called ESG. We need a common, richer taxonomy that captures 50 shades of green. And in that regard, I salute the proposal of the UN's climate financial leaders this week for transition indices. Only with such an approach can we make sure that our citizens, your citizens, can know where their money is being invested and whether it's being invested in line with their values. Excellencies, ultimately, the speed with which a new sustainable financial system develops will be also decided by the ambition of your climate policies. The more countries like the UK, like the EU, jurisdictions like the EU, turn their Paris commitments into legislated objectives and concrete actions, the new sustainable financial system will amplify the impact of your efforts by pulling forward sustainable investments and shutting down unsustainable activities. It's within our grasp to seize this virtuous circle. Thank you.
Mr. Carney, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Carney. Mr. Haley, the Secretary General is delighted that you're here today to launch a private sector-led initiative to strengthen the market for resilient investment. You have the floor.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to be able to address the UN Climate Action Summit on behalf of the Coalition for Climate Resilient Investment. This coalition is a public-private partnership which was motivated by the UN Secretary General's call for action, and it brings together leading organizations from across the global finance sector, from governments, and also from international institutions. Our goal is relatively simple. It's to transform mainstream infrastructure investment and to drive a permanent shift towards a climate-resilient economy. we look to do this for all nations, but especially for the most vulnerable. Through some major innovations and reforms, we aim to save lives and also trillions of dollars in lost assets across exposed regions in the years and decades ahead. The case for climate-resilient investment is further strengthened by the expectation that 70% of this infrastructure investment will go to low and middle-income countries. Those societies and economies are typically more exposed to climate risk. And it's critical that these climate-vulnerable geographies and communities both continue to attract investment and also that this infrastructure is built to withstand future climatic risks. Until today, there hasn't been a concerted cross-industry effort that focuses on climate resilience. The coalition aims to change that dynamic. It wants to mandate the finance sector create the tools and the standards to both price climate risk and then to facilitate resilient investments. By building and implementing the economic case for climate-resilient investments, capital is going to flow more naturally towards the resilient infrastructure. The coalition is in its early stages, but it already includes companies from across the investment value chain with over $5 trillion of US dollars of assets under management, and alongside with governments and multinational organizations. There are three things we're going to start out committing to. First of all, by COP26 in November 2020, we will be developing analytical tools, including a physical risk pricing framework and the methodology to prioritize national resilient investment needs. Along with that, we're going to have a range of tools to prevent capital flight from the most vulnerable regions. Second, we're going to be creating some innovative investments. An example of that would be resilience bonds, and we're going to implement climate resilience across leading infrastructure investments. Leading infrastructure investment funds, sorry. We've identified 6 country pilot projects where we're going to be testing these innovations and protecting economies and citizens' lives from growing climate risks. And then finally, we're going to be working in close collaboration with other related initiatives, such as the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure and the Coalition of Finance Ministers for Climate Action. I'd like to again thank the UN Secretary General for providing the motivation to us as well as our coalition partners. In particular, I'd like to recognize the leadership and ambition of the government of the United Kingdom in bringing this coalition to life. Without their commitment and their energy, we would not be making this announcement today. Similarly, we've had great collaboration with the World Economic Forum. They've been instrumental in galvanizing and securing the commitment of our coalition partners. And then finally, I'd like to pay tribute to the efforts of Mark Carney, who has generated incredible momentum in the global financial industry in shifting the way these risks are considered. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Haley. And thank you to the entire panel. Thank you to the entire panel, and thank you for your brevity. Despite the profundity of your remarks, you were able to do them quickly. Thank you so much. I'd now like to invite to the stage Her Royal Highness, Princess Lala Hassana from Morocco.